Chapter 10-12. On this day, almost all the nobles of the Night Elves learned of a piece of news. Queen Azhara left her chambers in the middle of the night to secretly visit a special person near Galhalla. Although it was said to be a secret, in reality, hundreds of moon guards who practiced both magic and martial arts passed through the streets and alleys. There was no April Fool's Day for the Night Elves. Almost all the important Night Elves doubted their ears. Queen Azhara left her residence. In order to maintain her top-notch appearance, she almost never went out. No, she rarely even left her own palace, not to mention Azhara City. Now that the queen had left the city, this night was destined to be different. This news was so explosive that even the news of magical green humanoid monsters appearing near Surlama was easily overshadowed. A rainy night. The Night Elves loved to go out at night, but the wet weather made Queen Azhara a little unhappy. But the little unhappiness in her heart was all driven away by the huge blue-skinned existences surrounding her carriage. Ah, they are so strong. The queen's eyes were strangely blurred. Like a lighthouse in the night, the luxurious golden carriage could attract the attention of others from afar. 12 terrifying blue-skinned warriors were like a moving wall, lined up beside the queen's carriage. Because they were too tall, they could only lower their bodies and bend their waists to pass through the roads that could be easily passed by carriages. This was to prevent the horns on their heads from damaging the beautiful arcades or archways that were characteristic of the Night Elves. They understood human nature so well, and were so obedient. Looking at their huge shields and extremely violent and beautiful maces and axes, Queen Azhara was completely entranced. She still remembered half a day ago, when she asked Savis, "What are they?" Savis's answer: "They are your most loyal guards, my empress. Protecting your life is their responsibility, and the only reason for their existence." Although 12 Heaven Realm warriors was a little, Savis promised that there would be more and more Heaven Realm warriors sent by God in the future. But these 12 were the first batch, and they were all sent for the queen. Azhara, who was deep in thought, stretched her hand out of the carriage window. Like a child who had just touched a new toy, her fingers lightly touched the bronze armor of a demon guard, making a hissing sound. The demon guard glanced at the queen, and turned his head back expressionlessly. These powerful otherworld guards were very important, but Queen Azhara felt that the 12 maids were the key. She knew very well what the criteria for choosing a maid was. Night Elves were born good at martial arts, swordsmanship, or archery, but there were still too few who were born with magic circuits. Those who were talented in magic had long been selected to become wizards. Elites who cultivated both magic and martial arts would be absorbed into the Moon Guards, which directly belonged to the queen. These 12 maids were obviously the kind that didn't have much talent. However, through the divine might of the Lord that Savis mentioned, he could actually directly engrave magic circuits on the maidservants' bodies, allowing the maidservants to have magic circuits from nothing and become low-level magicians. Her most loyal captain of the Moon Guards had told her that the 12 maids were all earth mages. This was truly an epic-making revolution. Everyone knew that the High Elves were crazy about magic. However, the worst part was that only a small group of elves could master magic. Even the union of 2 pure-blooded High Elf magicians had a chance of giving birth to a child that didn't know magic. This was something that Queen Azhara, who was crazy about using magic to rule the world, could not tolerate. It was obvious that this emissary sent by the god in her heart had presented her with a brand new technology that had broken the seemingly absolute barrier between mortals and mystics. This was the biggest reason why Queen Azhara did not hesitate to condescend, to personally visit. "As long as I have this, I can suppress those old fogies in Surlama in one go." The queen then retracted her gaze, and a strange yet happy expression appeared on her perfect face. "It seems that I have to make up my mind." At the same time, in the royal villa where the dirty moonwell was located, there was not a single night elf within a 100-meter radius. Duque was like a child playing with graffiti, doodling the dark energy that was so precious to the high elves. Seeing Duque messing around with the dark energy that had once tortured the orcs to the brink of madness, Grom sighed. Duque suddenly spoke in orc language. "Do you know the history of Azeroth?" Grom shook his head. "I've never had the time. When the orcs came to Azeroth, they were initially conquerors, and when they failed, they became survivors. As if he had thought of something, Grom added. According to my rough understanding, the Burning Legion was defeated in this ancient war, right? That's right. It was supposed to be like that, but it seems that someone wanted to change the ending. That's why Nozdormu sent us here. Our mission is to ensure that this part of history does not change, right? Grom bared his teeth. Duque did not answer directly and instead said, if nothing unexpected happened, would you be willing to run back to 10,000 years in the future? Be willing? The answer was obviously no. If Grom was still that arrogant orc, and his mind was filled with the idea of orcs beating all other races, then it would not have mattered. But after witnessing the Burning Legion's massive fleet in the Twisted Nether, and witnessing the massive demonic army that devoured and destroyed countless planets, Grom could not help but have a thought that would make a hero like him shudder. If he did not do something, even if the demons that descended on the world of Azeroth were only left with 1/100th of their power, the Burning Legion could just use their lives to fill the gap, and all life on Azeroth would die. Grom's tone was as firm as nails as he enunciated each word. No. Will. Heart. Then let us play it big. A mysterious smile appeared on Duque's face. All right. Not long after, the sound of quick and light footsteps surrounded the entire royal villa. The strong and magical moon wardens quickly occupied all the important positions in the mansion. After knocking lightly on the door and getting Duque's permission to enter, Savis entered and nodded at Duque and Grom. Savis straightened his clothes and chanted, Light of the eternal night, the most beautiful and powerful existence in the world, Her Majesty Azhara of the Kaldorii Empire, has arrived. Chapter 10:13. Any ruler would like to put gold on their faces. That was acting cool. He was nervous when Savis announced. If Duque, God's emissary, was displeased, he would be in trouble. Luckily, Duque did not react. Queen Azhara entered the room with her guards and maids surrounding her. She walked like the wind, and was full of confidence. She did not make any sound, and was even quieter than a cat's footsteps. The moment she entered, she noticed that Duque definitely lacked respect for her. If it was another existence, she might not be happy, but this subtle cold attitude just happened to prove that Duque came from the side of God. If he was God's emissary that surpassed all power in the mortal world, there would be no direct conflict with her imperial power. Queen Azhara understood her position very well. She gently lifted the hem of her gorgeous dress and bowed elegantly to Duque. May I ask if you are God's emissary, Lord Mark Dooku? This sweet voice made countless high elves fall head over heels. Indeed, the scene when she walked in with a smile was so perfect that it was breathtaking. Even Savi's eyes widened. She was the glory of the night elves. Every time she breathed, everyone held their breath and listened to her orders. From the expressions on the moon guards' faces, if they could please her, they would even be willing to go out and fight against dragons, or even opponents stronger than dragons. Even though they knew they would die, they did not hesitate. Grom's eyes widened. As a beast man, he had a different sense of beauty compared to humans and elves. But he was still afraid. Who was Duque? A perverted fellow who had taken care of the 3 Windrunner sisters, including Queen Servanas of Sindorii. Others might not know Duque's character, but Grom definitely knew. After all, he had fought with the 3 Windrunner sisters on the battlefield. Duque was an elf lover. Even though the beastman's understanding was slightly different, it was more or less the same. At this moment, Grom was really afraid that Duque would not be able to control himself and ruin his grand plan. However, Duque didn't react at all. That's right, Queen Azhara was indeed a great beauty. Her skin was as smooth as silk, and her long silver hair was scattered on her shoulders. The ends of her hair were slightly curled. The clothes she wore matched the color of her eyes, which was a graceful and luxurious silver color. But what kind of normal human would be attracted to a dark purple-skinned female night elf? Moreover, the Empress was considered very tall among female night elves, even taller than many male night elves. Only Savi's was better than her. Duque took a look and really wanted to shout, "Oh my God! I'm not Yao Ming, I can't handle this height." Most people looked at models with appreciation, but not every man had the height to match a model. Duque was by no means short among humans. Unfortunately, he was nothing in front of Queen Azhara, who was 2. 10 meters tall. If someone asked Duque why he didn't like Queen Azhara, then Duque would definitely reply, "Sorry. I don't like the feeling of climbing trees." Well, since Duque was immune to Queen Azhara's most powerful legendary weapon, beauty, then the next step was business. Facing Queen Azhara's question, the super cool best actor Duque slowly stood up from the chair, and a terrifying dark aura bloomed from his body. Then he slowly raised his right hand. Queen Azhara gently waved her hand to stop the nervous moon guards. At such a close distance, she could clearly feel the powerful, surging, ocean-like magic power on Duque's body. However, she was good at manipulating people's hearts, so she didn't feel any killing intent from Duque, nor did she feel any signs that he was going to harm her. Then, Azhara saw a ring on Duque's right little finger that emitted a terrifying aura of destruction. On the ring was the head of a two-horned demon that seemed to be burning with flames. The exquisite craftsmanship made the head look like it was alive. What she saw was not a small head on a ring, but a giant that was so huge that it could support the heavens and the earth. A flame giant that was bathed in flames. High Elf Azhara, kiss this ring with the head of my lord Sargeras. Show me your sincerity. Duke's voice was majestic, but it also had a kind of ethereal feeling. It was like the sound of a morning bell from a tall building in the distance, and it had a kind of penetrating power that could shock people's hearts. Not to mention the moon guards. Even Sarvis and Azhara firmly believed that this ring that emitted a huge wave of evil power was a holy item that the Lord of the Burning Legion had bestowed upon Duque. Only Grom was dumbfounded. Anyone would think that Duque was Sargeras' most trusted High Lord, envoy and favorite subject. Only Grom knew that Duque had never seen Sargeras before. Not only that, but this high-class magic ring was something that Duke had casually carved early in the morning. That bastard Duque still had the nerve to ask Grom for a few sweet potatoes from the maidservants to practice. Grom had thought that Duque's clumsy carving wouldn't be able to fool even the orcs. Who knew that Duque's improvement was actually at the speed of light? He'd found a gemstone of unknown material, and completed it in less than 10 minutes before the queen arrived. He'd carved Sargeras' statue and infused it with high-purity evil power. Everyone else believed that Duque was loyal to the Burning Legion, but Grom was the first to not believe it. Well, it seemed that the High Elves had been fooled. Grom suddenly thought that he understood how Duke had managed to unite the scattered kingdoms of the High Elves as he looked at the dumbfounded High Elves. Logically speaking, Duque was so arrogant that he didn't even call Azhara by her title. Instead, he called her High Elf Azhara. That was very rude. But the High Elves, who were crazy about power, liked it this way. As expected, the envoy sent by God was a fortress. Even a pile of God's **T smelled good. After Duque had pulled in the demon guards and displayed the era-transcending technique of carving evil power circuits in the human body, as well as the powerful magic waves, they were dead set on believing that Duque would bring them what they'd always been seeking. Power that transcended the mortal world. With Queen Azhara at the front and Sarvis right behind her, more than 100 high elves in the hall knelt on one knee and chanted the name of Sargeras as God. Chapter 10:14. That's right, Azhara was taller than Duque. After kneeling and lowering her noble head, she was just a lowly existence compared to Duque. A pair of soft hands carefully held Duque's hand as if he was holding a holy relic. Queen Azhara slowly moved her beautiful face closer to Duque's fingers, and slightly opened her purple lips that looked like they were painted with lip gloss. The lips that countless high elves dreamed of gently kissed the ring on Duque's finger. A lingering moan could easily make a man think of some adult toys. Her eyes were blurry, her face was flushed, and that terrible ending sound made almost all the night elves look up secretly. But only Azhara was enjoying herself. Oh, this power! This sweetness! High purity and low concentration of dark power flowed down her lips and down her throat. The warm feeling quickly spread from her stomach to every inch of her blood vessels, and into every cell. Azhara could clearly feel her body rejoicing, excited and ecstatic at the injection of this new power. Queen Azhara finally confirmed that this was indeed the power of a god. The most perfect power given to the high elves by the heavens. Even though she longed for more dark power, Queen Azhara was a very sensible woman. She took a step back and knelt in front of Duque. I Azhara, feel the power of a god. My lord's messenger, great Lord Dooku. Please read the will of God. The queen knelt in front of him, her beautiful silver hair draped over her bare shoulders. Her gorgeous dress spread out on the ground made Azhara look like a blooming violet. If it wasn't for the fact that the queen did not conform to human aesthetics, perhaps this would be a very erotic scene. Since it had nothing to do with hobbies, then of course it was official business. Duque calmly retracted his hand and said in a clear voice, "The will of Lord Sargeras is for you to offer up the Well of Eternity as a reward for your promotion. You will be granted great dark energy and true immortality. As for the first step, I hope that you can quickly build a giant teleportation gate that is big enough for my lord and the Burning Legion to pass through. Do you have any objections?" Azhara frowned and said with some difficulty, "The High Elves have no objections, but there are many Night Elves who reject arcane magic. They believed in the Moon Goddess, Elun, and the way of nature. I think they will firmly reject the Lord's arrival." Duque sneered. "Then why can't we find a way to prevent the outside world from interfering with our plan to build the portal? This will make things much easier for you in the future." Savis, who was kneeling at the side, raised his head and opened his mouth as if he wanted to explain. The natural division within the Night Elves was very difficult to unify, but when the words were on the tip of his tongue, he realized that there was nothing he could say. If it could be done easily, they would have done it long ago. Azhara was a little confused about Duque's words at first, until Duque added another sentence. "I mean, to forever avoid interference from within." This time, both Azhara and Savis understood. Their faces turned pale in an instant. Duque was hinting that if negotiations and political means could not solve the problem, then they should prepare for war. "Azhara, you are a queen." Duque commented on Azhara as if she was a passerby who had nothing to do with him. His deep black eyes gazed into her golden eyes, and his gaze gradually became stern. "But if a queen can't even control her own subjects, then it means that she is not worthy of the crown on her head. I think you understand what I mean. Of course, my lord hopes that there was only one Azhara in the past, and in the future." Duque's words were quite artistic and very sharp. The queen and Savis left in a daze. They saw hope in a way to obtain new power, but they were also forced into a dead end. Either they raised their butcher's knife against those nature elves who were unwilling to submit, or they offended the extremely powerful god that they worshipped very much. He could either raise his butcher's knife against the nature elves who were unwilling to submit, or offend the god that he worshipped and possessed immeasurable power. Worst of all, Duke had only given them 3 days to think it over. Almost as soon as the Night Elves left, Grom looked at Duque with a toothache. Almost as soon as the Night Elves left, Grom looked at Duke with a toothache. "Why are you looking at me?" Grom asked. "Did you forget that I told you about the original direction of this history?" That's right. Duque had indeed confessed this part of history to Grom. Lord Roar also knew that it was Queen Azhara who had sided with Sargeras that led to the famous ancient war in the world of Azeroth. Even though he knew this was the case, Lord Roar still felt his balls ache. At the thought of Duque seriously luring others to kill their own kind, and possibly succeeding, Grom felt a pang in his heart. If Duque used similar methods against the tribe in the future, would the tribe be able to withstand Duque's schemes? No matter how he looked at it, after being cursed by Arkharon and undergoing the Dark Power baptism, Duque seemed to have a lot more evil tricks up his sleeves. Grom struggled for a while, but still asked. If he did not ask, he was afraid that he would go crazy. "Aren't you afraid that Queen Azhara will suddenly attack and really destroy the Night Elves that originally belonged to the victor's side? Or are you going to secretly inform the Night Elves when the Queen makes her move?" Duque wagged his right index finger proudly, and then handed Grom a list written in Khador. This is a list of the Moon Guardians provided by Savis. According to Savis, these are the strongest who are absolutely loyal to the Queen in both magic and martial arts. If I am willing to use dark power to strengthen them, please choose from these elves first. Grom gritted his teeth for a long time. "I don't know Elven language. No. I just want to tell you that I saw a very interesting name in this list." Duque pointed at a name. "This name is Illidan Stormrage." "Illidan. Grom did not react to the name at first. After all, he was not a true transmigrator. After all, they had just fought the Battle of Mount Hyjal. Even if Grom did not want to care about the Night Elves, he at least remembered who had fought alongside him on the Night Elf side. Grom's heart suddenly tightened. He suddenly understood. Duque's smile was incomparably pure. Yes, pure as a fox. Illidan's brother is called Malfurion. At this point in time, the woman they are madly pursuing is Tyrande Whisperwind. Chapter 10:15. Grom definitely wouldn't recognize the Night Elves, but Tyrande had just worked with him. How could she not recognize him? Grom was speechless. Duque, that bastard. He even calculated this. If Queen Azhara wanted to attack the Nature faction, she wouldn't be able to bypass her most trusted and strongest subordinates, the Moon Guards. Unfortunately, the Moon Guards had the biggest traitor of the Nature faction, and one who had direct access to the higher-ups. It would be strange if the Queen faction could succeed. Grom really didn't want to ask where Tyrande and the Stormrage brothers were now. They shouldn't be low anyway. Grom's guess was right. Tyrande was already the leader of the Elune sisters at this point in time, and Malfurion had been studying under the demigod Cenarius for a long time. Once the two of them were alarmed, it would be like pulling out a radish with mud. Grom didn't give up. Is it good to cause chaos among the Night Elves now? Duque asked in return. Do you think the Night Elves will suffer heavy casualties from the ambush of their own kind, or from the ambush of the Burning Legion? Besides, Kil'jaeden will definitely send other strong people to open the portal apart from me. Since we have to ensure that the core of this history isn't changed, why don't we control the pace of things? Duque's words made sense. Lord Hal was speechless. In the past, Lord Hal only felt that Duque was scary, but he didn't know how scary. Only after working with Duque personally did he know that Duque's intellect surpassed all beast men. He was thrown into the huge pit that was the Burning Legion, but Duque still hid his identity and became a great lord, using the Burning Legion's name to swindle others. What was even more ridiculous was that after swindling the first one, he still came to eat the next one. Be it the Burning Legion or the Kaldorii Empire, they were both existences that could easily crush him. But at this pace, both of them were being toyed with by Duque. If not for the fact that Duque had always been a righteous hero of the Alliance, and was willing to suffer a curse from Archimonde for Azeroth, Grom would have suspected that Duque was a natural schemer. In the meantime, while Duque was actively deceiving his superiors and bullying his subordinates, secretly stealing Khador's authority, and seeping it into his personal goods, Azeroth's history was progressing as the original. Probably. Tyrande Whisperwind ended her evening prayers in the Moon Maiden Temple in Surima. Coming out of the prayer room, she slowly sat down on a chair and slightly stretched her body that was a little stiff from kneeling for a long time. There was one thing that had been bothering her for a long time. The relationship between Malfurion, Illidan, and her had changed over the years. They were no longer childhood playmates. The simplicity and happiness of childhood were no longer there. Instead, they were replaced by the complicated relationships of the adult world. Her feelings towards Malfurion and Illidan had also changed. She knew that their feelings for her must have changed. The competition between the two brothers had always been carried out in a friendly atmosphere, but as time went on, the competition became more and more obvious. She didn't like it. Now it had almost evolved into a fight between them, as if it was for the sake of competition. Tyrande knew that the target of their competition was her. She was flattered. Deep in her heart, she felt that when it came to finding a life partner, one of them should be either Illidan or Malfurion. She didn't want anyone to be hurt. But she knew that if she chose one, it would mean hurting the other. If she chose neither, it would be the worst possible outcome. Both would be hurt. Tyrande forcefully pushed the worries out of her mind and prepared to leave. She wore a silver-hooded robe, and did not say a word as she hurried through the grand marble hall of the temple. Even when the other priests greeted her, she only smiled in return. She looked up at the roofless roof of the temple. Most of the prayer rooms were open air, and the moonlight shone down gently, like a mother caressing her favorite child. Tyrande passed by the faintly discernible carvings of the goddess, and finally crossed the marble floor of the porch and walked out of the temple. Outside, the cool night air made her feel more comfortable. Tyrande walked down the smooth white steps and joined the crowd. Many bowed their heads to welcome her. Others respectfully made way for her. That's right. To the people of Surlama, the priests of the Moon Goddess Temple were the incarnations of the goddess. Even Tyrande herself was unconsciously deified by the people around her. Tyrande sighed softly and smiled at the people. But at this moment, Tyrande just wanted to return to a peaceful and simple life. Riding on the night saber, Tyrande's hair fluttered in the night wind. Tidying up her slightly messy hair, Tyrande allowed the night saber to lead her home while she fell into deep thought. It was the latest news. Her Majesty, who almost never left Azhara City, suddenly went to a royal villa in Garhala. It was rumored that the Empress did not hesitate to visit a mysterious guest for a brand new arcane energy. This was not a good sign. The highborn elves abusing the magic of the Well of Eternity could very well bring disaster. The topic of the Well of Eternity had always been a widely discussed topic in the Elune Sisterhood. The Queen's actions caused Tyrande and the other moon god priests to worry. At this moment, a loud commotion attracted Tyrande's attention. She noticed that there was a huge cage at the side of the central square of Surlama. A large group of night elves were pointing at the cage. What she saw was a huge, burly green-skinned humanoid monster. From afar, it looked a little like a troll, but upon closer inspection, this obviously male monster was at least twice as burly as a troll. His bulging muscles were showing off his explosive strength. Illidan was there as well. He and a few moon guardians were pointing at the monster. What's going on? Tyrande asked Illidan. I don't know. Our patrolling soldiers suddenly found this monster unconscious on the ground. When Tyrande tried to approach the green-skinned monster, Illidan grabbed her and said, Be careful. The moment this guy woke up, he almost killed a moon guard. That sword in his hand can easily cut through our armor. Tyrande noticed that one of the moon guardians next to Illidan was holding an extraordinary two-handed greatsword. It was a weapon that was completely different from the night elf style. Just as she focused on the greatsword, a voice came from the mouth of the violent green-skinned monster. Your Excellency Tyrande Whisperwind. Chapter 10:16. Tyrande jumped in fright, but she was certain that the green-skinned creature had said her name in the terrible Kadori language. You can speak Kador? Not only Tyrande, but even Illidan was shocked. He swore that before the green-skinned monster was escorted to Surlama, none of the elves had mentioned Tyrande's name in front of the green-skinned monster, let alone her full name. The green-skinned creature bared its fangs and mumbled some Kador syllables. It did not have the elegant and artistic tone of the elves, but it was still Kador. Kador, am not good at it. The corner of Tyrande's eye twitched slightly, and she turned her head. Illidan, let him go. But he once. Illidan was obviously in a difficult position. If you were in my shoes, what would you do if you woke up in a strange place and found an unknown being threatening your life with a weapon? Tyrande countered. Illidan was speechless and could only do as he was told. However, when he opened the door of the cage, he secretly held onto an elven dagger with his left hand. He had absolute confidence in his skills. Even if he could not stop this strange green creature with his instantaneous magic, he was agile enough to send the dagger into the creature's throat. Tyrande had a gentle smile on her face. She walked over and crouched down, chanting Elune's name. The goddess of the moon answered her prayer almost immediately, and a gentle white light descended from the sky. Praise Elune! The surrounding elves knelt in response to the miracle. The huge wound on the green giant's left arm healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Illidan sighed. Tyrande was too kind. For a monster of unknown race, she used a limited number of divine grace spells per day. However, this was also why he was so infatuated with Tyrande. Tyrande's lips moved slightly. I apologize for the rudeness of my people. Please forgive their overreaction. After all, they suddenly found an outsider in our territory. Yes. May I ask, what is your name? Apologize. My name is Bielo. Gex. Not. Kador enemy. That's right, this green-skinned fellow who was miserably captured and almost sent to the animal park to increase the ticket revenue was the orc hero Brock, who was sent here by Nozdormu to maintain history and cause trouble 10,000 years ago. Brock, who didn't expect to be separated, was dumbfounded. Fortunately, it was different from the original history that Duque knew. In the original history, Brock was thrown there without realizing it. This time, it was Nosdormu who had informed them beforehand. Thrall then hurriedly asked Duque to get a high elven mage to give Brock and Grom a language crash course. Sharpening a spear at the last moment. Even if it's not bright, it's still bright. It had to be said that orcs really didn't have any talent for languages. Other than Orgrim and Thrall, most of the beastmen were rough and boorish. No wonder the orcs were born with -2 intelligence in most Dungeons & Dragons games. Tyrant and Illidan took good care of Brock and moved him to a night elf inn. Even though the two sides had great communication difficulties, after a difficult night of detailed discussion, Tyrant finally understood one thing. There were 5 emissaries who came with Brock to the Khador Empire. Their goal was to stop a calamity that was about to affect the entire Khador Empire, and even the entire planet Azeroth. Burning Legion? The literal translation of the name made Tyrant's heart palpitate. Thinking of Queen Azhara's abnormal actions, Tyrant suddenly had an ominous feeling that a storm was about to arrive. She felt that she seemed to have seen through the fog of fate, and vaguely grasped the direction of events. Illidan, go back to the Moon Guards first. If there's nothing important, don't contact me and Malfurion. Remember to keep your distance. Understood. Illidan suddenly felt a sense of eagerness. Tyrant rarely needed his help. It felt good to be trusted by Tyrant at a time when something big was likely to happen. Unfortunately, Tyrant's next words made Illidan a little unhappy. The moon has already started to set. I can't contact Goddess Elun for now. I'll go and discuss this with Malfurion. Illidan had a bitter taste in his mouth. As expected, compared to me, you trust my brother more? This was an indescribable envy, even jealousy. But Illidan did not say anything. He turned around and left. He had already made up his mind to keep a close eye on the Queen. He wanted to dig out the secrets that the Queen's faction had purposely hidden to prove to Tyrant that he was the heroic companion she wanted. The sky was just beginning to brighten when Tyrant received another unexpected piece of news. Malfurion personally came to find her, and the first thing he said was, 3 strange beings came to our forest, and Cenarius took them in. 2 of them claimed to be humans, and one of them speaks a strange elvish language that seems to be derived from Khador, but the words are obviously different. That's not important. They brought a message. Soon, a terrifying demon army called the Burning Legion will descend upon Caldorii. Tyrant was shocked, and her chest heaved up and down. This was the second time she had heard this name that night. She really wanted to treat this term as nonsense and expel it from her mind, but she couldn't do it. Let's go and meet those outsiders first, and then we need to reach an agreement with Cenarius and the others. One of the main reasons why Sir Lama could maintain a different political view from the Queen was that the natural faction had the support of Goddess Elun, and a large number of demigods, excluding Goddess Elun, who had not descended to the earth as an avatar. Including Cenarius, the Bore Gamagan, the Bear Brothers User and Usoc, the White Stag Malorn, the Storm Raven Averna, and the other immortals formed the Ancient Guardian Formation, which was like a mountain blocking Queen Azhara's path. Just as Tyrant was startled and reacted. In Galhalla, Duque, who was allowed to have almost unlimited power, was performing a summoning ritual on the main vein of the Well of Eternity. Although Caldorii, who claimed to be a high elf, was considered the ancestor of magic under the Blue Dragon, Duke realized that the way Savis and the others used magic was so crude that it made people's hair stand on end. Chapter 10:17. Come to think of it, if there was an inexhaustible source of mana, then the priority would definitely be to create something grand and not to pursue efficiency. It was like a rich man with a net worth of tens of thousands of dollars for a meal. As a result, the habitual rough use of mana made many finer spells lose the opportunity to be developed. It was different in the future. The second Well of Eternity was made by Illidan after he stole a few bottles of pure Well of Eternity water and diluted it. The High Elf Sunwell was made by Dethrima after he stole Illidan's collection. It was an inferior third-generation product. Although the High Elves had always bragged about how awesome their Sunwell was, It might be true for humans without a mana source. But compared to the most primitive version of the Well of Eternity, it was as ridiculous as some Chinese daring to claim to have filled the entire Poyang Lake with a 330 milliliter bottle of mineral water. Since there was no way to provide an unlimited supply of mana, he could only work on techniques to make up for the lack of quantity. Didn't you see that the amazing Phoenix Flame magic circuit that should have been popularized had become the exclusive supply of the Sunstrider royal family? It was because the requirements for mana were too high that it couldn't be popularized. Because the High Elves had an inexhaustible power of the Well of Eternity, they neglected the various basics and the creation and optimization of magic circuits. As a result, once the mana that an individual could carry reached the upper limit, the strength of a mage would immediately peak. In turn, they would lose the various magic skills that should have been obtained through training. When Duque displayed extraordinary magic skills in front of Savis, what he received was, of course, a full house of applause. Duque drew a three-dimensional magic array with 7 floors. From bottom to top, there was a magic array on each floor. If one looked down from the sky and saw through it, they would find that it was 7 huge concentric circles. From a three-dimensional perspective, it looked like an inverted cone. When Duque finished drawing, the Cador Arcanists were already kneeling on the ground. Duque used the incomparably cool crystal pulse staff as a magic pen. After he finished drawing the array, he elegantly let the staff return to his portal bag. Okay, activate the magic array. You can attract more messengers of the gods. Duque's look of "don't ask me to do such a heavy job" made him look pretentious. Only Grom at the side knew that Duque was now a king priest. He really couldn't do the job of summoning. At this moment, in the distorted void, Kil'jaeden's long right index finger was drawing circles on a huge moonstone with his sharp nails. Her nails, which were strong enough to break gold and jade, easily dug out a handful of green powder from the moonstone. The Eridar twins did not even dare to breathe loudly. They were familiar with Kil'jaeden's style, which meant that Kil'jaeden was getting impatient. He was a very generous master. At the same time, he was also an extremely harsh master. Benefits can be given, and the amount can be negotiated. The premise is that you have to satisfy his seemingly bottomless and crazy demands. The Gemini knew very well that it was not Kil'jaeden's original plan to send a human lord into Azeroth. However, after a simple test, they found that the guy called Infernal seemed to be more suitable to break through planet Azeroth's defense array. That was why they sent him first. Now 2 days had passed, and there was no reply at all. According to the previous agreement, they had to return to the distorted void as soon as they successfully logged in. Kil'jaeden suddenly said, 3 days. I'll wait until the 3rd day at most. If there's no reply, then you two will go. In the Burning Legion, most of the demons preferred to be rough and violent. When it came to sneaking in, this was the Eridar twins' specialty. But for the Gemini to go, it meant that Kil'jaeden had chosen the wrong person, which was a slap to his face. This would obviously cause Archimonde to start showing off again. At this moment, Elises suddenly sensed something. Master. There's a response. It's infernal. He directly opened a high-level teleportation door with high stability. It can allow a mid-tier demon lord to enter Azeroth without any damage. Elise's voice was slightly excited. Ha! A rare smile appeared on Kil'jaeden's face. There was a huge difference in difficulty between letting a demon lord of the same rank who was completely resisted by the planet's defense system descend, and letting a mid-tier demon lord who had adapted to the world of Azeroth arrive without any damage. If it was stable, the difficulty would be 10 times higher. Kil'jaeden originally sent Duque to take the lead, and only asked him to find a way to contact the army believers in Azeroth to see if he could build a relatively stable small teleportation door, and teleport as many elite demon guards as possible over. He wanted to build a forward base in Azeroth, and then consider expanding the teleportation door. Now that Duque had directly completed the task, the Eridar twins who were responsible for recommending Duque were also proud. Elises stepped forward. It seems that our new lord is very capable. I didn't realize that Infernal's spatial magic level was so high. This has completely surpassed the standard of mortals in Azeroth. Queen Saloras smiled. He has already used his actions to prove his loyalty to the army. Master, do you think? On the surface, the twins were asking for a reward for Duque, but in reality, weren't they asking for credit for themselves? Kil'jaeden also smiled. I hate trash the most, but I'm never stingy with rewards for my capable subordinates. He waved his huge demon hand and 3 boxes that emitted a mysterious purple glow appeared in front of the twins. Give the last one to Infernal. The twins giggled and accepted it. Elises asked, Master, who should we send as a mid-tier lord? Kil'jaeden smiled evilly. Didn't Archimonde always say that the second wave must be his subordinates? Then let Magtheridon go. In all fairness, Magtheridon was also a very powerful demon. If not for the fact that Duque had just dealt with Manaroth, the boss of the Abyss Lords, Magtheridon would definitely cause trouble for Duque. However, with that incident, it was clear who was the leader and who was the second. They were both intermediate lords. In the end, in the Mage Tower of Galhalla, the High Elves who kept chanting and pouring huge amounts of magic finally waited for the other oracle of their dreams. It was a giant demon with a lower body like a dragon and an upper body like a human. It was more than 30 meters long and 12 meters tall, and wielded a double-headed heavy sword. Chapter 10:18. When this huge demon squeezed through the portal like toothpaste, Savis and the others were worried that the portal would not be able to withstand it and explode. In the end, the magic formation that Duque had drawn stood the test, and allowed this huge demon to successfully descend. Unexpectedly, this huge demon that could make any Kadorii tremble knelt in front of the tiny Duque. I obey Lord Archeron's orders. Before the main force of the Burning Legion arrives, I, Magtheridon, will obey all your orders. In terms of size, he looked like a dragon swearing allegiance to a newborn deer instead of eating it. It was laughable, but no one dared to laugh. Duque's body glowed like a dark sun, constantly reminding the people around him of his terror and power. Duque's high status left the Kadorii speechless. Duque rubbed his eyebrows and said without holding back, Damn it! I want a warlock, an Eridar warlock who can help stabilize and open a larger portal. Why did Archeron send me an idiot who only knows how to charge and break through enemy lines? Magtheridon subconsciously wanted to flip out on the spot. But at that moment, the Duque in front of him suddenly changed. It was not a change in Duque's power, but in his aura. It was as if time had turned back and he had returned to his childhood, when he was watched by a group of fierce elders. It was a feeling of helplessness and terror. This terror was even greater than most of the Burning Legion's high-ranking lords. Magtheridon's dark green face immediately turned the color of pig liver. Anyone could see that he was sullen, but he did not dare to show it. Come to think of it, Duque had defeated his boss, Manaroth, in one move. If he really wanted to deal with him, half a move was enough. Feeling the surging dark power on Duque's body, Magtheridon, who had been slapped in the face on the spot, would do as he was told even if he had to break his long, horn-like tusks and swallow them himself. He once again lowered his huge demon head. Apologies, Great Lord of the Spiders. It is Lord Archeron's will that assigned me here. If you have any opinions, you can report them to the Lord. I am only responsible for obeying your orders. The first half of the sentence pointed out that there was still a boss behind me, but the second half was obviously a sign of fear. Such a colossus that exuded a terrifying aura was acting like a little wife who had suffered domestic abuse, admitting her grandson in front of Duque. This scene was as strange as it could be. Savi secretly sucked in a breath of cold air, his reverence for Duque involuntarily increasing. Of course, Magtheridon was the main culprit in this large-scale teleportation, but the total number of teleportations wasn't just enough to teleport an intermediate lord. Since the defense circle of planet Azeroth had not been completely cracked, no one knew when the next teleportation would be. Therefore, it was necessary to send as many troops as possible. If the maximum number of teleportation this time was 100, then Magtheridon would have more than 80 points. The remaining points would still be enough to send a lot of elite demons. Groups of demon guards and apocalypse guards stepped out from the wide-open teleportation gate. Apart from them, there were also many Eridar succubi. They wore the most sexy and provocative clothes, or rather, They wore shameful strips of cloth tied around their necks. The moment they appeared, they shamelessly winked at the high elf arcanists. From the old men to the arcanists who were obviously still young, they were all within their hunting range. Finally, nearly 1,000 demons knelt on one knee in front of Duque. According to Lord Kill Jaden's orders, from this moment onwards, including me, Dog King Hacker, all 1024 demons will be under the command of Lord Kill Jaden. The one who spoke was a demon officer bathed in flames and lava. He had a head that looked like a dog's head. Dog King Hacker was not the evil god Hacker that the trolls worshipped. This Hacker could only be considered a more powerful mid-level demon commander, and his strength was weaker than a lord's. Duque kept an eye on him, because this guy was trash in other aspects, but his special skills were rather interesting. Duque's gaze suddenly became sharp. His gaze, which was 10,000 times sharper than a sword, swept across the 1,000 demons from left to right. Then Duque suddenly attacked. A black whip as thick as a pillar swept across the battlefield in 1/100th of a second. The terrifying strengthened version of Mental Whip was temporarily applied to every demon. Without exception, all of the demons fell to the ground, twitching in pain. Amidst the cries of pain, a ferocious expression appeared on Duque's face. Perhaps you haven't heard of me before today, but that's not important. From now on, I'm sure everyone has a very deep understanding of me. Now isn't the time for you to wantonly kill and destroy. When the time comes, I'll let you have your own fun. But before that, you'd better tuck your tails between your legs. Whoever dares to spoil Lord Sargeraz's plan, I'll distort the void and crush the souls of your idiots one by one without Lord Sargeraz's help. Do you understand? Duque's final roar made the thousands of demons tremble. At this moment, Duque turned around and called Savis over. He pointed at Savis. Now all demon guards and doomsday guards must listen to the command of this high elf, Savis. Even if he wants you to commit suicide, you must do it. Understood. Hundreds and thousands of demons knelt on one knee in unison to Savis. It could be seen that Savis's face was flushed with excitement that couldn't be concealed. Duque's eyes turned and looked at the enchanting succubi. As for you, do whatever Lord Kill Jaden tells you to do. But you, come here for a moment. Seeing Duque's face reveal an evil smile that all men understood, the Cadorrace arcanists all revealed envious expressions. One reddish-brown, one purple, the two sexy succubi twisted their slender waists that would make single dogs drool. They wrapped their arms around Duque's waist seductively and followed Duque into the side hall. Almost as soon as the door closed, Duque heard a coquettish voice echoing in his ears. Great Lord, you really have good taste. You picked us sisters at once. Lord Infernal, may I ask what type of service you would like? Perhaps some people would ask if Duque had really joined Major's discipline, and finally wouldn't let Eridar's hooves off? Of course not. Duque rubbed his nose. My lords, don't play with me. Just say what you want. Tisk, you saw through me? How boring. After two coquettish shouts, the two succubi revealed their true forms. Of course, they were the Eridar twins. Chapter 10:19. Sneaking into the enemy's rear, playing dirty and forcing women into prostitution, and letting every heavily defended fortress fall from the inside. This was the Eridar Gemini's forte. There was a poem that praised the Gemini. This body is a wretched wretch, often thrown into the enemy's formation by the boss on a whim. Though in countless battlefields, never once defeated, never once tasted defeat, never met a bosom friend, often hugging each other on the peak of a burning mountain to have sex, therefore, he didn't know the meaning of this life. This body is destined to be born of wretches. Cough cough. This poem was, of course, made up by players. It was referring to the Gemini's situation in the army where they were not loved or cared for. Every time they could not break through the situation and had to take a roundabout route, they would force the Gemini, the demons who worked behind the enemy's formation, to step in. After successfully opening the door, they would rush into the planet to slaughter and destroy, and the Gemini would have nothing to do with it. It could not be helped. Most of the races in the Burning Legion were muscular men who advocated violence and destruction. They would only scream outside the defensive circle when there was a problem. and those who were willing to put their minds to work were the minority. And so they kicked the Eridar Gemini over. Duque was absolutely sure that there was no such scene in the original history. So the Gemini's goal was, of course, to keep an eye on this unreliable leader of the army. But before they could observe in the dark, Duque pretended to show his power and pulled them out. Even if they lowered their strength to pass through the magic circle, their mental strength would not be weakened much. Duque was using the enhanced mental lash, which had a large area of effect. How could a normal elite demon have the same mental strength as the Gemini? That was also the reason why the Gemini's anger was half real. But they were still considered gangsters. They had entered the battlefield to prevent Duque from stirring up trouble. In fact, when Duque had infused his dark energy, connected with Queen Azhara, and opened the portal, in the eyes of the Burning Legion's higher-ups, the possibility of Duque betraying them was almost negligible. The Eridar twins were not angered by this. They immediately reverted to their true colors and started fawning over Duque, the newly promoted Great Lord with a bright future ahead of him. Aura's eyes were like silk, and her soft hands gently shook Duque's left hand. Hey, Infernal Affairs, Master Kil'jaeden is quite satisfied with your performance this time. Queen Solola's leaned directly on Duque's right shoulder. Since Master Duque is in a good mood, we've spent a lot of effort to get these things from Master for the sake of you making us sisters proud. With that said, Gemini waved her hand at the same time, and 3 treasure chests emitting powerful mana fluctuations appeared in front of Duque. The best actor Duque, of course, was instantly immersed in his role. Like a money grubber, oh no, like a starving dog, he pounced forward and opened the treasure chest, letting out a series of exclamations. The Eridar twins' faces were still frozen in awkwardness as their hands were suddenly emptied. This brat clearly did not like the Eridar Demoness, seizing the opportunity to escape. But who were Gemini? A professional worker behind enemy lines. A professional, okay? In any case, Duque's crazed gaze towards equipment was not an act. Since she knew Duque's weakness, it was a small matter that she couldn't seduce Duque. Originally, Sir Kil'jaeden wanted us to pick 2 of them first, and the last one is for you. Aura's voice sounded at the right time. Queen Saloras continued. But seeing that you've just become a Void Lord and don't have much good equipment on you, Infernal Waters, I'm afraid that you're a new Void Lord. We sisters will reluctantly part with our treasures and give them to you first. The best actor, Duke, looked embarrassed. This is a piece of equipment that every lord yearns for, Aura said. Queen Solola's sighed. Hey, I really can't bear to. The Eridar twins echoed each other. It was so obvious, how could Duque not understand? If Duque chose to continue pretending to be stupid and try to get the equipment, they also had a backup plan to deal with Duque. Even though Duque was the leader of the Church of Immoral Principles, Duque's moral principles were as high as ever when it came to soul corruption. Duque immediately smiled and said, Infernal Water's position today is all thanks to the 2 Eridar sisters' guidance. If there's anything I can help with, please let me know. Although he said that, his hands did not relax at all. He grabbed the equipment in the 3 chests in his hands, clearly showing that he didn't want the equipment. He wouldn't give his life. Everything else was negotiable. Seeing Duque acting like a miser, Gemini smiled like a flower and said, Hee. It's not an order. I just hope that Infernal Waters can provide as much detailed information as possible on the enemy, so that we can work for Master Kil'jaeden. What Gemini wanted was never simple destruction and destruction. There were too many boorish people in the Burning Legion who relied on their muscles to make a living. No matter how good Gemini was at fighting, it was impossible for them to surpass Vanguard generals like Manaroth, not to mention a big shot like Archimonde. They relied on information to become rich. Just as they reached this step, they were shocked. With many years of secret work experience, they could tell at a glance that Savis, the general who had pushed for the Burning Legion to descend, was completely obedient to Duque's words. In addition to the various deductions, Duque had actually controlled almost all of the High Elves in a short 2 days. This was a good thing for the army, but to Gemini, it was tantamount to losing an important point of entry. If they wanted to obtain further information, they could not avoid Duque. Gemini very straightforwardly proposed an exchange of benefits to Duque. To their relief, Duque immediately agreed. No problem. But 2 days is too short. I have to prepare the summoning spell and collect information, so this information is definitely not complete. It is only a general idea, and a lot of it came from Savis's words. Duque took out a thick piece of parchment from his pocket. On it, there was a long list of names written in Eridar, as well as the corresponding introductions. Gemini was overjoyed when she saw it. Written on it were names such as the Supreme Leader of the Moon Guards, Latuzius, and the Lord of Fort Raven, Ravencase. Of course, there were also the names of some lords. For the Gemini who had just arrived, this was definitely no different than a beacon in the dark. Whether Duque was hiding anything or not, it could be said that it was easy to find out. Duque would also not fake this kind of thing. It was impossible for Gemini to know Duque's evil intentions. Admittedly, these guys who seemed to be very important were indeed the backbone of the Night Elves. But many of them in the original history were just bystanders. For example, just mention Latuzius. If this guy did not kneel, there would not be Illidan's position. The ingenuity of this was something that outsiders like the Eridar Gemini could not understand. Moreover, among Queen Azhara's political enemies, they were not the ones who made the most noise. Since they were all cannon fodder teammates in history, Duque really did not feel the pinch when he sold them. Chapter 1020. Sending the information was just a basic exchange. This level of information was definitely not enough to exchange for Kill Jaden's treasures. Duque also sent dozens of gossip, one of which was, one of the important leaders of the Elun Sisterhood, Tyrande, was in a love triangle with the Stormrage brothers. As the first disciple of the demigod Cenarius, Malfurion Stormrage, who had a great influence in the Naturals, had the upper hand in this love competition. Illidan Stormrage, who had basically failed, joined the Moon Guard. For a demon who specialized in tricking people into falling, a single dog like Illidan who was frustrated in love was the best target. Only Duque knew how crazy Illidan's infatuation with Tyrande was. At this point, Duque had secretly buried a nail that could change the entire situation of the battle. The highlight was naturally at the end. Noticing that the Gemini were willing to reduce their strength from a standard lord to an elite demon, Duque enthusiastically recommended his new invention to the Gemini, a dark magic circuit system engraved on the surface of the skin. This method of increasing the magic circuit in a disguised form made Gemini's heart beat faster. Moreover, this was a magic circuit powered by dark energy. The Gemini really could not find a reason to refuse. But the Gemini was very careful. Just let Saloras inscribe the dark energy circuit. Both you and she are of the shadow attribute, so the amplification will be greater. The high-grade warlock Oresis who specialized in fire magic used a very legitimate reason to only let Saloras inscribe. I see. You guys can decide. With a calm and indifferent expression, Duque engraved a set of magic circuit inscriptions on Queen Salora's smooth back. The effect of Duque's personal work was so good that even Oresis was a little envious. Dark energy was a power that the Eridar clan had mastered to the point of perfection. It was true that the Eridar Gemini had exerted their strength, but as warlocks, their strongest point was not their bodies, but their dark magic circuits. Now that Duque had inscribed a set of circuits on Saloras, he could feel Salora's strength rising rapidly. This effect was not 1 + 1 = 2. At the very least, the effect was equivalent to 4. In just 3 hours, Salola's had reached the level of the Hound King Hacker. Coupled with Salola's gorgeous shadow magic, she had the strength of a quasi-lord. For a moment, Aless almost wanted to ask Duque to carve a set for her. In a place where Duque couldn't see, Salola's gave her sister a look, suppressing Aura's impulsive heart. It was only at this moment that the 3 pieces of advanced epic equipment, that Duque was finally safe. The headgear Dark Spell Ring, Desecrator's Gauntlet, and Kill Jaden's Broken Cloak were the 3 top-notch cloth armor items at the current stage of the game. They instantly increased Duque's strength by at least 30%, making him almost as strong as a high-tier lord. Firstly, he did not dare to use the equipment he had obtained in the Battle of Mount Hyjal. Secondly, although it was a priest's equipment, Holy priests and shadow priests were two completely different positions. The divine priest is the nanny. The shadow priest was a powerful magic attack profession. Didn't you see that even the strongest defense warrior would have a set of crazy damage output equipment in their backpack? Duque had contributed so much to the world. There was nothing wrong with him having two sets of equipment. Eridar left with a satisfied look on her face. Duque stayed with a satisfied expression on his face. Time unknowingly came to the third day after returning to Azeroth. Duque was sleeping soundly when suddenly, without warning, a sharp dagger was pressed against Duque's neck. Evil fallen one. Accept the punishment of justice. It was an extremely cold female voice. Duque raised his eyelids. Damn it. I just pulled an all-nighter last night. Do you still want me to live? With that, Duque turned over and continued to sleep. The attacker froze for a full 3 seconds before sighing. My Duke Beast, you are still as shameless as ever. Now I believe that you are not fallen. That's right. Bypassing a number of demon guards, silently snuck up to Duque's side without being alerted by the system elf. Of course, it was one of them. Vanessa, dressed in a thief's outfit, gradually revealed her figure in the air. Fallen? I was so close to being completely finished. However, I am now. Lord Infernal Emissary, the Great Lord of the Burning Legion? Such a tasteless name, I know it's you. Vanessa smiled as she put away the pair of deadly daggers that were enough to make any wizard tremble in fear. Bullshit. If you don't know it's me, then get out of the Marcus family. Duque poked his head out of the quilt. That won't do. The Van Cleef family has sworn loyalty to the Marcus family for generations to come. Do you have the heart to let a weak woman like me freeze to death in the snowy wilderness? That scoundrel Vanessa turned on her acting mode. Looking at the crocodile tears that had just been squeezed out with eye drops, Duque really wanted to slap this maid who specialized in angering her master to death. What the hell, a weak woman? You can almost dismantle a Gundam. No, dismantle a fell mecha with your bare hands. Why are you still pretending to be a weak woman? Bah. Duque snapped. Alright, make sure I'm fine. Is there anything else? If there's nothing else, then scram. Vanessa spread her palms. Give me the information, and I'll scram immediately. Duque rolled his eyes but still handed a small ball to Vanessa. Don't look for me if there's anything before the crucial moment, and even more so if there's nothing else. Understood. In the next moment, Duque, the powerful maid who had stepped into the realm of heroes, disappeared in the morning light. Looking at the sky outside the window that had finally become sunny, Duque pondered. The actors on the old stage are all here. May I ask, Goddess of Fate, what kind of surprise or scare will you bring me this time? Throughout the ages, those who could clearly grasp the veins of fate, let their vision transcend the mortal world, and control the overall situation had always been rare. At this moment, there were still countless people daydreaming. In the palace of Azhara City, Queen Azhara danced happily. Her graceful stains made the eyes of a group of maids stare. Hee hee hee. Vashj, am I beautiful? As the queen's personal maid, Vashj's face was filled with fanaticism. In this world, there will be no existence that can resist your majesty's charm. Is that so? That's great. Yes, that spy from yesterday must be pretending to be calm, because he knows that his master, Sargeras, must be infatuated with me. In that case, I will become his matriarch. Chapter 1021. Every being had the right to daydream, but only 1 in a million could turn a seemingly unreachable dream into reality. Duque didn't know how stupid Queen Azhara had to be so sure that she could make Sargeras fall head over heels for her. Anyway, he had no obligation to save these self-proclaimed nobles among the elves, nor did he plan to reverse this 10,000-year-old history. If things went awry, the Night Elves' hegemony on the continent would be permanent, and there would be nothing left for humans after 10,000 years. Then wouldn't the empire, harem, that Du had built up be ruined? Are you kidding me? Since the High Elves want to die, I won't stop them. Thus, Duque became the Great Void Lord of the Burning Legion with a peace of mind. However, in order to prevent himself from getting too into character and causing the Night Elves to fall, Duque still did his homework. Less than half an hour after Vanessa left Duque's side, Tyrande received a magical image that made her tremble both physically and mentally. Under the summons of Savis and the other elven arcanists, a huge three-dimensional magic formation was activated. Hundreds and thousands of demon soldiers lined up neatly and walked out of the portal. Burly bodies, muscles full of violent beauty, sharp and hard fangs and claws. All of the above almost made Tyrande faint. An unprecedented sense of danger filled her and Malfurion's hearts. Mr. Roddick, Miss Vanessa, please repeat what you know. This is very important. Ronan, who went by the alias Roddick, and Vanessa, who basically didn't appear in the Battle of Mount Hyjal, both appeared before Tyrande and Malfurion after putting on makeup. The Burning Legion's invasion is unavoidable. Most of the nobles in Caldorii have already become the Burning Legion's minions. War is about to break out. I don't know the exact time of war, but I'm sure it's very near, Ronan said with absolute certainty. Malfurion, however, noticed another detail. This magical image is very magical and very stable. I can't imagine how they managed to bypass the detection of so many great arcanists and complete the recording. Miss Vanessa, can you explain? I won't hide it from you. Roddick's teacher, who is also my master, is currently in the enemy's formation and is in a high position. However, we are unable to fully trust you, nor can we tell you his current identity. Please forgive us. However, the authenticity of this information is extremely high, so please be prepared and stop fantasizing about Queen Azhara, because she is one of the masterminds behind the Burning Legion. The two night elves clenched their fists. Even though Roland had long since known that the noble high elves were crazily obsessed with the arcane arts, attracting the most terrifying demon army in the universe in order to obtain even greater power was no different from self-destruction. I'm going to find Cenarius. Malfurion rose. I'll talk to Elun, then contact the various lords. Tyrande's face was ashen. At this time, Luo Ning suddenly said, actually, one of our companions has already contacted the dragons. Dragon race. Tyrande exclaimed in shock. To the ancient night elves, the dragons were a race that was both very close and very distant. The dragons who guarded the world rarely interacted with other races. However, any intelligent race would know how powerful the dragons were. Yes, Luo Ning said solemnly. Impossible. As long as it was immortal, once they stepped into the Dragon Clan's territory, they would be burned to ashes. The Dragon Clan would not give anyone a chance to explain themselves. Call your companion back immediately, Malfurion said anxiously. Luo Ning shook his head. It's fine. My companion's identity is a little special. He will definitely succeed in convincing the dragons. Crassus was also a red dragon. As the saying went, don't talk to your own people. The dragon's breath would never land on Crassus. In any case, this was a little secret. Tyrande heaved a sigh of relief. Tyrande said, if the dragons join us, Luo Ning interrupted her with the words, I'm going to win. No. Even if all the 5 colored dragons come together, they might not be able to defeat the Burning Legion. All we can do is avoid collapsing right from the start. As for the opportunity to win, we need to look for it seriously. Tyrande's faces paled. They couldn't help but raise their guard against this unknown Burning Legion. Tyrande spoke resolutely. We will prepare to the fullest extent possible for this war. Malfurion said, I'll have to trouble you to help with the rest. Luo Ning and Vanessa nodded at the same time. In fact, Luo Ning sighed too. He was also very helpless about this time's transmigration. On one hand, the information he had gathered was limited. Nozdormu had forbidden them from coming into contact with the Night Elves, saying that it might cause an irreversible change in history. This made it difficult for Luo Ning to follow the main storyline of the Ancient, or even if he wanted to. After all, as far as Luo Ning knew, only Tyrande and Malfurion were still alive after the Ancient War. However, they were not allowed to come into contact with them. As for the Ancient War, Luo Ning had flipped through the incomplete records and history books that the Dalajan had salvaged, but he could only find a bunch of vague fragments. He roughly knew that the Burning Legion had come once 10,000 years ago. Then the Earth aspect dragon Neltharion betrayed them and blew up the Well of Eternity for some unknown reason, destroying the ancient Kalimdor continent and sending the Burning Legion back to their homeland. As for how it became like this, he had no idea, nor could he verify it. Most of the information humans had about the ancient war came from the High Elves. In this period of history, there was naturally no lack of High Elves trying to flatter themselves. The only thing he could be sure of was that a Nastrian Sunstrider's father, Das Rima, had participated in the war, and his role seemed to be a little dishonorable. He was completely at a loss for the rest. On the other hand, he felt that his master, Duque, knew a lot of information that he didn't, but Duque refused to say it no matter what. Now the biggest trump card of the Azeroth coalition army was undoubtedly Duque, who had become the Burning Legion's Void Lord. Looking at the backs of Tyrant and Malfurion leaving, Luoning sighed. With Master's character and intelligence, he probably won't stop until he makes the Burning Legion bleed. Vanessa shrugged her shoulders, looking as if she was about to die. I'm also very helpless to have such a master. Right, what should we do now? Chapter 10:22. I'm going to learn from Master during the battle at the Dark Portal. I'll think of a way to print a batch of battle manuals and teach the Night Elves how to deal with demons. This will prevent them from taking the wrong path. Experience gained through blood and life was always a priceless treasure on the battlefield. This could change the balance of power on the battlefield. Vanessa suddenly asked, "What is Brock doing?" Ronan shrugged. After he regained his freedom, he was summoned to see Cenarius. It seems like the demigod is trying to strengthen his Blade of Cataclysm. Lucky guy. Right, how much time do we have? Master told me to go to Azhara at noon and midnight to keep an eye on Grom Hellscream. Before the city's defenses were strengthened, a hero-level thief like Vanessa could enter and leave Azhara easily. She immediately understood what it meant to keep an eye on Grom. At noon on the first day, Grom was playing with ivory carvings in the corner of the royal garden. He was carving on a steel boar's tooth, carving the head of a lord of the abyss on it. On the second day, Grom was playing with wood carvings, using an axe as a carving knife and carving out 2 lords. At midnight on the third day, Grom went to the toilet 3 times. Every day, Grom would do something new. The intelligent Vanessa immediately understood what he was doing. Unbeknownst to most of the Night Elves, the dark clouds of war were rapidly accumulating. On the 6th day, Vanessa finally received new instructions. It wasn't until the 7th day that Tyrant finally received the most conclusive piece of information. Illidan, who had joined the Moon Guard, had snuck back and told Tyrant the terrifying truth that there were 5 Burning Legion lords in Azhara. Tyrant no longer hesitated, and went straight to the Night Elves' respected Lord Ravencase. She showed Ravencase the evidence. Ravencase's face was ashen. He swung his strong arm in a circle and slammed his fist on the table. That traitor Savis must have deceived Her Majesty. No. I must encourage all the lords to start an operation to rescue the king. Tyrant was speechless. She could not help but admire Queen Azhara's charm. Even though there were images of the Empress appearing near the teleportation portal, and even footage of the Empress happily caressing those burly and ugly demon guards, there were still many lords like Ravencase who believed that the Empress had been deceived. 5 lords of Caldorii had the same idea as Ravencase. The only good thing was that at least they were ready for war. Just as the war was about to break out, something big happened in Azhara City. A huge commotion came from the outer city of Azhara. It was the resting place of Queen Azhara. She ordered music to be played in the hope of driving away the noise, but alas, the lyre and flute were of no use. She had no choice but to get up. Her new bodyguard, the Demon Guard, followed closely beside her. She strolled gracefully through the palace. The first person she saw was not Jarvis, but Varsun, the captain of her guards, who was on one knee with one fist on his chest. I am the Supreme Empress. My dear captain, why is it so noisy outside? The night elf with a face full of scars looked up at her, and hid his expression. Perhaps it will be easier to show it to you. Very good. He led the way to a balcony overlooking the main city. Azhara rarely came to this balcony because she didn't want to be seen by the public. She preferred the view from the luxurious balcony in her room, which might allow her to see a corner of the Well of Eternity. With a snap of Varsun's fingers, a royal arcanist released a small, telescopic vision. Then the spiritual spell visual projection showed the queen that many civilians in the outer city were vomiting and having diarrhea. It was a terrible scene. EW. The queen waved her hand, not wanting to continue watching. The mirror image disappeared instantly. Your Majesty, it seems to be a plague. How can there be a plague? Why didn't anyone report it to me? The queen looked displeased. At this moment, Savis hurried over. Honorable Lord of Evernight, I may be able to explain. The queen raised her hand and gestured for Savis to continue. According to your instructions, we are shutting down the magic branch of the Well of Eternity, so that more magic power can be injected into the construction of the portal. When we shut down the magic branch of Count Ali John Farrell's Mage Tower, it seemed to have caused a leak in the Count's lab. Leak? Yes. It seems that a virus that can cause severe diarrhea leaked out and contaminated part of the water supply. As a result, more than 10,000 civilians are infected. How many Caldorii died? Not many died, but their excrement seems to have the possibility of secondary contamination. The civilians are panicking now. The queen looked even more displeased. I don't want to see any filthy people in my city. Therefore, an incident that didn't exist in history happened out of nowhere, and then inexplicably set the tone. Azhara began a large-scale evacuation operation in the city. No, it was more accurate to say that it was banishment. A large number of moon guards and city guards carried shining magic weapons, and wantonly drove the civilians away from Azhara. For a moment, the main city of Kalimdor, which stood in the center of the continent, was in chaos. On top of that, there was a rumor that an even more terrifying and deadly plague would spread in 2 days, which directly triggered a frenzy of fleeing among the residents. In just 2 days, this huge city with a population of more than 1 million was completely empty. The only place that wasn't affected was the inner city where the High Elves lived. The songs were still sung, and the dances were still danced. In the underground palace of the inner city of Azhara, the twins found Duque. Queen Saloras said in a teasing tone, "Yo, my dear spy, what do you think of the wave of refugees outside? Manaroth was going to descend soon. If there isn't enough blood, who knows if those guys will go berserk." This was obviously a test. If it didn't go well, it would be like mud falling on one's pants. Even if it wasn't shit, it would still be shit. As an honest and reliable young man, Dumok was, of course, spouting nonsense with a straight face. Oh, so what? Duque's tone was full of disdain. On this small planet, a primitive race that doesn't even have interstellar warships or interplanetary teleportation portals. Even if they escape, where can they escape to? For me, completing the mission that Lord Kill Jaden entrusted me with, and opening a larger and more stable portal, as soon as possible to welcome the Burning Legion's main force is my only task now. Whatever you want to do, just do it. It's none of my business. Chapter 1023. Were the Eridar Gemini suspecting Duque? The answer was yes, because it was too sensitive for something to happen at this time. The Gemini's experience from working behind enemy lines told them that there must have been a leak. Someone was using this special method that went against the style of the Night Elves to save the elven civilians. However, no matter what the Gemini thought, they wouldn't really suspect Duque, because Dooku was fully immersed in the great cause of opening the teleportation portal. Duque's knowledge of teleportation was so rich that it surpassed their professional Eridar warlocks in many areas. As a result, the matter regarding the teleportation portal was completely led by Duque. If someone told the Gemini that it was Duque who was secretly evacuating the civilians, the Gemini would be the first to not believe it. After all, this was contradictory. The evacuation would only last for a while. The destruction and death brought by the Burning Legion would last forever. What Duque was doing was speeding up the destruction of this planet. When Duque finished adjusting the largest teleportation portal built based on the Well of Eternity and teleported Archimonde, and even Sargera's over, the situation would be set. Duque's current behavior was completely that of a loyal subject of the Burning Legion. The Gemini was just asking. Then, they turned their gaze to the most unreliable High Elves. The Empress faction was mostly madmen who pursued power. They didn't care about the lives of the lower-class civilians. As long as they could obtain the power to break through their limits, their thirst for power would be satisfied. Looking at those ignorant idiots who worshipped Sargeras as their creator and god, the Eridar Gemini laughed coldly at the same time. Idiots. Just hold on to your hope and wait. Auras couldn't stop giggling. After your planet is destroyed, you'll probably have the same expression as those idiots before. Queen Sololas had clear contempt. Who knows, there might be a great void lord among these self-proclaimed high elves. There's only one infernal affairs. Interestingly, even though they had come into contact with countless civilizations and destroyed countless planets, the Eridar people still didn't understand the meaning of the word, infernal affairs. The Burning Legion's invasion continued. Every night, at the most suitable time to open the portals were opened one by one. From small teleportation portals the size of the palace's side hall to large teleportation portals that were 20 meters wide and 60 meters tall. The elite demons of the Burning Legion streamed out one after another. What was rare was that these demons did not attack immediately. Instead, they were all stuffed into sardines and placed densely in the underground palace of the royal family in Azhara City. Coward. This is the behavior of a coward. Manarotha's roar shook the entire underground palace. On the 100-meter-high roof, the sand was shaken and fell down. The Lord of the Abyss waved the double-headed sword, but as if he were performing, he only dared to swing it on the spot, and did not dare to let the tip of the sword move half an inch forward. Because there stood a seemingly insignificant existence. Duque. Idiot. Since even Lord Archimonde wants you to accept my moderation, I will not allow you to do so. Both commanders have set opening the largest portal as their top priority. This proves one thing. The importance of planet Azeroth is far beyond the imagination of a pig-headed demon like you. Duque acted like a true Lord of the Void, mercilessly lecturing Manaroth, who had been defeated by him. But look at these demons. Are they still the mighty warriors of the Burning Legion? They're worse than dogs. Not daring to challenge Duque's authority, Manaroth was not stupid and changed to a roundabout way to ask for permission to fight. Duque glanced at the huge portal that was about to be completed by the Burning Legion's dark craftsmen. Forget it. Leaving a fool like you here won't be able to guard the portal. Then bring the Lords of the Abyss to cause trouble. Do whatever you want. The more the merrier. Everyone could hear the sarcasm in Duque's words, but Manaroth felt as if he had been pardoned and brought his underlings to work. Karzak Kazragar. Guard this place. Duque said without turning his head. Yes. Understood. After the two promises, these two lords of the apocalypse, who had been killed on Mount Hyjal 10,000 years later, listened to Duque's orders like loyal dogs at this point in time before they were killed 10,000 years ago. This scene was truly comical. An hour later, all the night elves in the Kaldorii Empire were alarmed. One by one they raised their heads. In their perception, the world that had been bustling with noise a moment ago had suddenly become silent. There was no night wind, and every leaf in the forest outside the window was drooping. There was neither the sound of wind, nor the chirping of insects. Only the loving light of the moon goddess Ilun poured down from the branches in the form of moonlight, and shone on the cheeks of the night elves. The expensive magic lamps that would never be extinguished at night all lost their luster, and every night elf city fell into a short and strange silence. What happened? Where's the magic power of the Well of Eternity? In the darkness, countless elves exclaimed. However, their panic and agitation were the greatest contrast to the lackluster magic power tributary below the city, that did not even have the slightest ripple. At this moment, all the elves felt that the world they were familiar with was deviating. The magic power that was once extremely familiar and powerful seemed to be leaving them in fear under the threat of the goddess of fate. In the dark, it seemed that something sinister was descending, as if some terrifying existence was waiting for them at the crossroads of fate. An invisible black hand was secretly guiding and manipulating everything with its unparalleled power. The elven arcanist subconsciously looked around, and found that many monsters that had been imprisoned in the magic prison, from the smallest magic dragons to the extra-large dragon beasts, were all running out of the prison cells. Unexpectedly, They thought that these monsters would immediately turn on the elves after gaining freedom, and take revenge on the masters who had imprisoned them. However, no matter what kind of monsters they were all trembling and even running around in panic. No one realized that they were doing everything they could to get away from Azhara City. All the elves who could sense the magic power felt their hearts skip a beat. Because at this moment, all the wizards in the entire Chaldorii Empire had their connection with the Well of Eternity forcibly cut off at the same time. Chapter 1024. In the entire Chaldorii Empire, there were hundreds of castles of various sizes. Most of the castles' owners were no longer around. They gathered in the castles of the leaders of various regions, intensely discussing the intelligence from the Elun Sisterhood, the leader of the Nature faction. Queen Azhara brought in demons for the sake of new power? That's nonsense. The queen is not a fool. How could she bring in demons that are so powerful that they can destroy her? Just as the lords were arguing fiercely, these lords in gorgeous robes opened their eyes wide in horror. Everyone realized that from that moment on, the Well of Eternity no longer sent any magical response. Not only them, but the entire Night Elf Empire, the entire Kalimdor continent, and thousands of other species all felt the emptiness and loss in their hearts. Before this moment, they were more or less direct or indirect beneficiaries of the Well of Eternity's massive magical power. But after this moment, their connection with the Well of Eternity was cut off. The power that they once enjoyed had now turned into nothingness. Unease and panic quickly spread among the people. Just like the Celestial Empire before Duke's transmigration, not to mention an indefinite power outage. Once human society returned to the Iron Age and needed candles for illumination, just the lack of Wi-Fi alone was enough to cause many young people who were heavily addicted to cell phones to suffer from mania. Now many people in Azhara who were unwilling to evacuate, as well as the city guards, and even some of the moon guards, naturally wanted to ask for help from their queen and call for Azhara's guidance. The soldiers and civilians quickly gathered in front of the inner city gate of Azhara, and more people gathered. At the beginning, there were hundreds of people at each gate, but now there were thousands. On top of the gate, the sentries looked expressionless, neither opening the gate nor appeasing the surging crowd. Until midnight, most of the elves who were still in the city rushed to the 4 gates of the inner city. Outside each gate, tens of thousands of elves gathered. Duque, who had asked the demon's eye to transmit images to him in the name of surveillance, secretly sighed in his heart. In his heart, even if this was transmigration, even if he knew that he could not greatly change the history of the ancient war, he still did not want to treat the innocent night elves as sacrificial lambs. Now Duque realized that his thinking was wrong. At this moment, those who were still in the outer city of Azhara were definitely not ordinary people. Magical power. We want magical power. Give me magic power. Give it to me or I'll go crazy. To Duque's surprise, the people rioted. Some elves seemed to be venting their frustrations as they blasted Fireball at the inner city of Azhara, which was still high and mighty and revered as holy half a day ago. The weak fireball that lacked magic power smashed into the inner city wall. Before it could touch the wall, it was blocked by the inner city's magic defense wall, and turned into clusters of sparks and flames. Some of the elves frantically tore at their clothes and scratched at their purple skin with their not-so-sharp nails, leaving deep bloody marks that exposed their flesh. Some of the elves were crying and yelling. While shedding tears of blood, they were grabbing their compatriots beside them and tearing them apart in a frenzy. Some elves even started to set fire to the houses around the inner city in order to vent their dissatisfaction with the Empress. Looking at them, Duque took a deep breath. It was just like how the high elves suffered from magic addiction after losing the Well of the Sun. Now, even their beautiful faces had become hideous and distorted. These fellows who had lost their rationality were undoubtedly drug addicts. However, because the magic density of the original Well of Eternity was many times higher than that of the Well of the Sun, they were addicted to the Well of Eternity magic, which was many times stronger than the original Blood Elves in history. When the addiction flared up, drug addicts could trample on all conscience in the world and murder all the beauty in the world. Duque suddenly understood that the fall of the once prosperous Chaldorii Empire was not without reason. At this moment, Queen Azhara was beside Duque. Azhara was still the same Azhara, but the scene in front of her was no longer the one she was familiar with. Azhara's golden eyes witnessed the scene of the city falling into destruction. The buildings that were quickly turning into ruins in the flames, the sea of fire that was gradually joining together, and the crazy elves who were murderous to their compatriots. She looked around and found that the inner city wall that protected the high elves was still intact. Are these my beloved people? Queen Azhara was trembling all over. Savis, who was beside the queen, stepped forward. Your Majesty, do you see this? These are all lowly people who appear to be obedient, but in reality, they don't care about your rule and benevolence. Everything in front of us is worthless. For a more perfect world, all imperfections should be swept away. Swept away? When Duque heard this word, he only felt disgusted. Weren't the high elves the ones who abused the magic of the Well of Eternity and caused millions of subjects to be deeply addicted to it? At this moment, Queen Azhara turned around and faced Duque. May I ask if the most trusted servant of Creator Sargeras, the commander of the heavens, the lord of the infernal underworld, also agrees with us doing this? Duque's disgust for Azhara deepened. This was a so-called ruler who pursued perfection. Everything a perfect queen did had to be perfect. Of course, Azhara couldn't allow her city to be tarnished by those addicts. But as a perfectionist, she couldn't open her mouth to announce the purification of her subjects. Ha ha. You want me, a fake Void Lord, to be the scapegoat? Duque laughed coldly. Isn't it your right as a queen how to deal with your subjects? This seemingly ambiguous sentence made Azhara and Savis think that they had gotten enough hints. Savis nodded first. If Sir Mark Dooku says it must be done, then it must be done. Moreover, the other commander of the heavens, Sir Manaroth, also thinks that purification is necessary. I have always believed that in the name of pursuing glory, sacrifices are unavoidable. Moreover, these are thugs who tarnish the glory of Her Majesty's holy city. Azhara had briefly met the unforgettable Manaroth with her chief counselor, and she had fallen head over heels for the towering servant of the Creator. Seeing that the two commanders of the heavens had agreed, the Shadow Queen Azhara nodded awkwardly. Savis lowered his head. Your wisdom transcends the galaxy. The queen accepted his praise with the calmness of an emperor. She received many compliments every day. This was a major part of her life. As if she couldn't bear to see the carnage that was about to happen, Azhara asked, will this last for a long time? Isn't the Creator coming soon? Chapter 1025. Duque said neutrally, dark energy extracted at the cost of life and destruction will undoubtedly hasten the arrival of Lord Sargeras. Then I have no objections. The queen sighed as if she was bemoaning the state of the universe and the fate of mankind. She placed her hand on her chest. Yes, I hope that when Sargeras comes, I can be the first to know. If I can't personally greet him here, I will be very regretful. I also really hope to let you know in advance. Duque said without a trace. Now please leave, Queen. I have to open the portal. The queen bowed absent-mindedly. Her eyes seemed to be completely immersed in the huge and psychedelic portal in front of her, and the true meaning of the gods. That's right, in Azhara's mind. She began to imagine the world she dreamed of. An even greater planet. Every inch of land on the planet was her territory. There were no more ice or ancient gods to stop her from extending her power. Everywhere, there were glorious monuments erected in her honor. This planet would no longer be called Azeroth like people were used to. No, it should be called Azhara. For the queen's hometown, this was such a fitting name. Azhara. She said it to herself twice, and she was intoxicated by it. She should have made this change a long time ago, but it did not matter now. Besides, she had an even more attractive idea. Indeed, her face was exceptionally perfect. It was the symbol of her people. But there was something more glorious and greater. Soon he would come. His name was Sargeras. She whispered, Sargeras. God Sargeras. A smile that was almost childlike flashed across her face. His partner, Azhara. Accompanied by the almost crazed whisper, the tall and slender figure disappeared from the gate. Duque was speechless. Crazy woman. If I tell you that Sargeras does not like you at all, Will you kill yourself in anger? In recorded history, Sargeras had only ked one woman, yes. 10,000 years later, when he possessed Mediv, he ked the standard green-faced, fanged Garona, and gave birth to a monkey called Medan. Oh, a mixed blood. Do you have measurements of 60, 50, and 60? Do you have green skin? Do you have hideous little fangs? No. I'm sorry, but you're not qualified. Duque let out a long sigh in his heart. He fully activated his best actor power, and announced loudly in front of the Eridar twins and the other Void Dukes with a mocking expression. Open the door. Following Duque's announcement, the 4 gates of Azhara's inner city finally opened slowly. The elves outside the door all crowded forward like a surging flood. They were certain that Queen Azhara would eventually answer their pleas. However, the one who appeared in the palace wasn't an empress, a minister, or a ceremonial official. It wasn't something that the Night Elves had seen before either. Instead, it was the Burning Legion, a demon army that represented death and destruction. A 4-legged creature with strong canine-like limbs, bright red skin with black spots, long white bull horns, and 2 sharp black whip-like tentacles. This was the infamous Hellhound of the Burning Legion, even in the next 10,000 years, to the mages. Looking at the Hellhounds that formed a huge carpet behind the inner city gates, the Night Elves who were about to charge forward let out sharp shrieks. The tragedy officially unfolded at this moment. The elves at the front retreated, and the elves at the back who had become reckless due to their magic addiction surged forward crazily. When a few elves at the front tried to cast magic, their spellcasting ability was temporarily sealed by the Hellhounds' spell block, and their end was inevitable. At 3 o'clock in the morning, the first victim of a demon on planet Azeroth was born. The Hellhound easily used its huge horns to break open the stomach of the unlucky fellow. Then, with its mouth that was as sharp as a bird's beak but filled with sharp teeth, it tore out the long intestines in the elf's stomach. Ah! The heart-wrenching screams instantly ignited the panic of the people. They only wanted to see Queen Azhara and vent their dissatisfaction and resentment for losing the magic of the Well of Eternity. They never thought that they would be greeted with such an inhumane massacre. Tens of thousands of elven magic addicts were drowned by the even more terrifying Hellhound tide within minutes. Tons of fresh blood gathered at high speed and filled the entire moat of Azhara's inner city. Manarotha's huge figure appeared at the city gate that was slightly narrow for him. He swung his double-headed sword that weighed several tons and burst into the most joyous laughter since he descended. Ha ha ha. Go. My little bastards. Massacre. Destruction. Tonight is the Burning Legion's feast of death. Ha 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 ha. Beside him was the Hound King Hacker, who had been bestowed with power and had advanced to a low-level lord. Hacker's body was covered in light and shadows, and the space around him rippled like water. Countless Hellhounds were leaping out of this special portal for Hellhounds, allowing even more Hellhounds to directly arrive from the distorted void to participate in this massacre. Not only low-level demons like the Hellhounds and Demon Guards, but even the Lords of the Abyss under Manaroth had entered. Those massive war machines that looked like dragons turned into bulldozers and smashed the tall and beautiful elven houses as easily as a pile of toy blocks. The continuous rumbling sound spread from near to far, all the way into the distance. Azhara, which had always been a city that never slept, welcomed light after a short period of darkness. Unfortunately, this was the light of destruction. Every fire represented the collapse of a 1,000-year-old cultural relic house, symbolizing the death of a double-digit number of elves. Krasis, riding a huge red dragon, was hovering outside Azhara City. He was dumbfounded as he watched the scene unfold before him. Impossible. Why didn't he stop this even though he knew that this would happen? Krasis was a little confused. He could not understand why Duque did not stop this destruction, even though he knew that his goal in coming to the ancient war was to protect history. Who is he? Krasis? The huge red dragon asked. Krasis did not know how to answer, because any spoilers from him could very well affect the attitude of the dragons towards Duke 10,000 years later. In the end he answered vaguely. He is the leader of our alliance, a great being whose soul will not fall into the abyss even if he is cursed with the darkest of curses. Chapter 1026. The red dragon was non-committal. What are we going to do now? The red dragon's combat power was indeed strong, but it depended on who it was compared to. If it was just the night elves, then as long as it did not encounter a Breaking Dawn mage or a mage tower, the red dragon could come and go as it pleased. If it was the Burning Legion's air force, then it would be a different story. Krasus knew very well that if Mount Hyjal did not have the domineering magic circle that forbade high-altitude flight, the result of the battle might be rewritten. The Burning Legion's air force was far more terrifying than imagined. Krasus shook his head. Let's go back. We must inform the other races and unite all the powerful and native creatures of Azeroth. Okay. At the same time, the messengers came to Fort Raven every few minutes. All the messengers wanted to see the master here because there was new news every time. Every news was equally terrible for Ravencase. No matter what, there was no way to obtain magic power from the Night Elves. Even the most experienced wizard here was helpless. In addition, the spell power that relied on the Well of Eternity to provide the source had also failed, and it had caused unfortunate results in one or two places. Panic happened one after another, and they were almost numb to it. It was only at this moment that Ravencase realized that after losing the Well of Eternity, and with the failure of magic communication, it was almost impossible to maintain law and order with the power of mortals. The middle and low-ranking officials in various places could have avoided chaos, but these officials were in chaos. Even if the lords had received the news early, they were not sure of the authenticity of the news, and did not pass the news to the middle and lower levels, which directly led to the current chaos. The most important places, the areas near Azhara, had been cut off from news, and it boded ill rather than well. The Moon Guards, who were once proud of, could not even compete with the most primitive ordinary warriors who relied on their own physical strength. At least the ordinary warriors would not be addicted to magic. Damn it. Savis, you evil man who should go to hell. How much do you want to bewitch our queen? Ravencase angrily hammered the table. Tyrande was not afraid of the angry eyes around her. She stood up and said righteously, "No, Your Excellency Ravencase. Let me emphasize once more, this operation was personally approved by Queen Azhara. Enough. The gods belong to the gods. What belongs to the Emperor belongs to the Emperor." Ravencase interrupted Tyrande. Tyrande's expression was ugly, her chest heaving with anger. This was also Kaldoriai's chronic ailment. Even though this was an era where deities frequently appeared, Kaldoriai was undoubtedly a kingdom ruled by emperors. The great nobles who controlled a large number of troops and power were very sensitive to the interference of gods and churches. Tonight, there were a total of 118 lords gathered in Fort Raven, which accounted for less than a quarter of the entire Kaldoriai Empire. More lords chose to wait and see, or directly move their families into the inner city of Azhara, firmly choosing to stand on the side of the queen. Even though they looked like they were rebelling now, the slogan they were shouting was still, "Long live the Empress." We must protect the king and eliminate the side of the emperor. At this moment, Malfurion suddenly strode in from outside the hall, accompanied by a tall green giant and a short but fair-skinned humanoid creature that the lords had never seen before. Ravencase, this is no longer a simple battle for the throne. If you think that there are no traces of the gods in this war, then you are wrong, Malfurion yelled, and then put down a magic crystal on the huge military map. The next second, a huge three-dimensional projection appeared over the military hall of Fort Raven. It was a huge figure not much smaller than the majestic gate of Azhara, a fat but dragon-like lizard-like lower body, coupled with an extremely swollen humanoid upper body, and a terrifying double-headed sword that could easily cut down an arrow tower. All the evidence supported the horror of the Burning Legion that Tyrande spoke of. What is it? Ravencase could not hide his trembling. At this time, the male human beside Malfurion, who was shorter than the Night Elves, stood up and bowed to the Elven lords. "Dear lords, greetings. I am a human from another world. My name is Roddick. As a person whose hometown is also threatened by the Burning Legion, I have come here to report the intelligence of the Burning Legion." After some opening remarks, Ronan said in a deep voice, "This monster is the vanguard of the Burning Legion, the Lord of the Abyss Manoroth, who has destroyed countless planets. As soon as Ronan's voice trailed off, there was a burst of gasps from the lords. Destroyed countless planets? The lords wanted to accuse Ronan of exaggeration, but after seeing Manaroth easily destroy a mage tower that kept releasing lightning magic at him, no one dared to say anything. If you still need evidence, there is. Ronan snapped his fingers. In an instant, in the middle of the liege lords, under the illumination of the bright torches and the focus of their gazes, beside the table with the military map, a slender but shorter human figure appeared. She seemed to appear out of thin air, twisting the air and appearing in front of everyone. Who? Ravencase was the first to draw his sword. She is not the enemy, Tyrant and Malfurion said at the same time. The next moment, a masked woman with the same fair skin as Roddick appeared in front of the elven lords. She silently offered another magic crystal and placed it on the table. The lords were in an uproar when the image and voice were released, because the main character in the video was their most revered and respected Queen Azhara. In the image, Queen Azhara turned around and faced the side. May I ask if the most trusted servant of the Creator Sargeras, the commander of the heavenly realm, the lord of the infernal underworld, agrees with our actions? Everyone here was a senior noble of the Caldorii Empire. Of course, they understood what the queen's words, which were full of political art, meant. They, the lords of the various lands, had been abandoned. Mercilessly abandoned. When the queen was preparing to welcome the so-called god, she didn't even consider informing them. The resentment of being betrayed and abandoned filled the hearts of all the lords in an instant. Almost every lord wanted to roar at the sky to vent the rage in their hearts. Chapter 1027. Only Ravencase broke the magic crystal on the table with his sword. Wait. Our arcanists have never seen such a sophisticated illusion system. Who can guarantee that the information provided by you, outsiders of unknown origin, is true? Ronan was speechless. Reforming the magic image system and storing it, that was technology from 10,000 years later. He really could not refute it now. And who the hell are you? Which race are you? Don't think that your clumsy makeup can fool my eyes. Ravencase pointed at Ronan, who claimed to be Roddick. Even if we are willing to believe that the queen is involved in this operation, it does not mean that we, the noble Cador, will believe you guys of unknown origin. Stubborn, arrogant. It was a guy like Ravencase who had great influence in the upper echelons of the entire Cador Empire. The feudal lords who were filled with righteous indignation immediately distanced themselves from Ronan and Vanessa. At this time, Tyrande walked out, and it was obvious that her clenched fists were shaking. Look at the situation. In the face of such a strong enemy, you still have the mood to play your noble politics. This is no longer something that we Cador can handle alone. We need to contact all the forces that can be united. Ravencase waved his hand. No. We have had enough of suspicion and betrayal. We are the High Elves. We are born to be noble rulers. Even if our queen is deceived for a while, only the High Elves are qualified to polish the queen's eyes. I, Ravencase, the Lord of Fort Raven, propose once again, eliminate the treacherous Savis. And after this war in the name of the queen, we will implement a parliamentary system. The queen will still be the supreme head of Cador in name. Ravencase's eyes were sharp. As for those huge alien monsters, we will use our swords and magic to tell them how Cador occupied the most fertile land on this planet. How did they occupy it? Of course, from the hands of the trolls. With swords. With bows and arrows. With invincible magic. Ravencase raised his arms and shouted, and the feudal lords cheered in unison. Tyrande, Malfurion, Ronan, and Vanessa were all silent. Ravencase said arrogantly to Tyrande and Malfurion, "You can choose to join us or not." Without even replying, he led a large number of lords out of the military conference room. Ronan muttered in human language. Is this fate? Or is it that the power of tradition is so deeply rooted and unbreakable? Vanessa clearly had a different opinion. But Master still revolutionized the entire alliance. Those who don't fit the times will eventually be eliminated. Ronan suddenly shuddered. He somewhat understood what Vanessa meant. Those who tried to stop the wheel of history were destined to be crushed by destiny. No one could save them. All we can do is unite the remaining, purer forces that can be united. 3 days passed, and Ravenkes managed to pull out an army of more than 300,000 Cadores. They gathered into a surging torrent, and marched towards the half-destroyed Azhara city. At the same time, in Azhara, Grom was very depressed. Even though he knew that this was part of Duque's plan. Even though he knew that patience would bring him greater rewards, the Burning Legion badge on his chest still made him feel ashamed. This was not the first time he had seen a demon. In his eyes, the seemingly huge and terrifying Cerberus was just a swing of his axe. The cleverer-looking demon guard with a huge horn and a demon's face was also a swing of his axe. In reality, he could only swing his axe at any demon. But with these demons gathered together, he could not swing his axe much. This was because this group of demons was not a pile of loose sand, but an army. Without the support of his comrades, he believed that he would only be able to kill 100 demons at most before he died. This made Grom feel depressed. Strolling along the long corridor of the palace, as he approached the palace with the few teleportation portals, more and more demons surged out from the palace gates. He was not surprised that the huge and beautiful building in the eyes of the elves was undamaged. Just as Duque had told him, most of the elves who had fought alongside him 10,000 years later were now conspirators of the Burning Legion. Grom could see the guards standing in a neat row by the wall. As he got closer, he could even see the twisted and terrifying joy in their eyes under such a creepy scene. Their silver eyes were all red, and some looked like they could not wait to become part of the demons and join this demon army that had destroyed their home. Grom felt a wave of disgust and quickly turned away. On the side of the palace, he noticed that the High Elves' residence was completely preserved. Some of the Queen's servants were even walking from room to room, as if nothing had happened around them. Walking quickly to the teleportation area where Duque was, Grom resisted the urge to kill the 2 Apocalypse guards at the door, entered and saw Duque. Seeing that there were no other demons around, Grom whispered to Duque, "I've had enough." Duque laughed. It was really hard for a fierce general like Lord Roar to play the dirty game. "Oh, do you like war?" Grom was stunned. He could not read Duque's thoughts. After a moment of silence he replied, "I do. Those night elves who overestimate themselves have formed an army. Of course, this is nothing to worry about. What I'm concerned about is that according to the latest information, they seem to have one of your compatriots." Duque laughed sinisterly. Compatriots? Grom's 2 bell-sized eyes widened. Of course he knew that Duque was referring to Brock. Duque, who had transformed into a shadow priest, laughed sinisterly as if he was the most evil incarnation of darkness. "I use my mind to control and torture you. You're unhappy too, aren't you? My slave, I'll give you a chance to be free now. Go kill your compatriot, and you'll be free. Or you'll be killed by your compatriot. As for the future, it's up to you whether you want to escape or raise your axe against me or the Burning Legion." You demon. Grom finally had some talent for acting. He understood that Duque wanted him to jump back to the righteous faction during the war. Would he get rid of Brock? Of course not. As someone who had worked with Tyrant and Malfurion before, Grom knew very well that the High Priestess of the Moon Goddess had a way to calm the mind and dispel negative mental states. Chapter 1028. Scram! Duque snickered and snapped his fingers. Soon a succubus came in. "Lord of the Infernal Tunnel, did you call for me?" "Yes. Put this dirty beastman into today's team. If he shows any signs of rebellion, then execute him." "Understood." With that, Grom left with the succubus with a complicated expression. At this moment, Duque suddenly sneered. "Come out, I've already noticed you." "Ehe. How rude of me." The ones who came out were naturally the Gemini Alida. Duque's face, shrouded in dark power, had a domineering arrogance. "What, do you have a problem with me punishing my own servant? Your servant seems to be quite strong. Is it really good to give up just like this?" Duque was not surprised by the chain of questions from the telepathic Gemini. The dark aura on Duque's body became more and more vigorous. Just being 10 meters away from Duque made one feel like they would be devoured by the dark magic. "It doesn't matter. To me, he's just an object to be thoroughly studied. He has long lost his greatest value. After becoming a Void Lord, I can have as many powerful servants as I want. There are at least 24 high elven mages outside the door eager to lick my shoes. Elise's narrowed her eyes. Aren't you afraid that your servant will really rebel and cause trouble for the Burning Legion? Queen Sololas chuckled. Who knows, the sin of a servant's betrayal might be on your head. Duque snorted. Lord Archimonde is about to descend. As long as I complete my mission, who will make things difficult for me for my test subject. The Gemini was a little speechless. Duque had grown too quickly. From an inferior race that popped out of nowhere, he became the Lord of the Burning Legion in one leap. Now the credit for opening the portal was going to fall on his head. But he also knew the way to survive in the Legion. Yes. As long as he completed Kil'jaeden's strict requirements and did not betray the Legion, he could be forgiven, or even deliberately ignored, no matter how big his mistake was. The credit was greater than anything else. There was even a hint of jealousy in Gemini's heart. Perhaps another lord would have been able to claim the credit of Duque's achievement. The problem was that the other lords did not have such a high adaptability to Azeroth as Duque, nor did they have the spatial magic ability to create a portal like Duque. If a lord whose power had been greatly reduced had descended here, he might not have been able to subdue Savis and Queen Azhara, and he wouldn't have been able to build the teleportation portal so quickly. At this moment, a terrifying will descended. Duque and Gemini bowed at the same time. Greetings, Lord Kil'jaeden Master. Infernal affairs. How long will it take to build a portal that allows Archimonde to pass through? Kil'jaeden's huge crimson shadow almost filled up the hall that was at least 200 square meters. The shadow was so realistic and filled with a sharp pressure. Duque and Gemini didn't even dare to raise their heads. Duque replied in a serious tone. In the best-case scenario, we need to purify the water from the Well of Eternity that has been polluted by the High Elves before opening it. That will take 14 days. You know, I'm asking for the fastest time. Kil'jaeden seemed a little impatient. Duque glanced at the Eridar demon wizards around him. If I just want them to help me purify the magic and let me control and build the portal, that will take 3 days. Working together, 7 days. Kil'jaeden's left eye clearly narrowed. He knew that this fellow called Infernal Affairs had high attainments in spatial magic. But Kil'jaeden would never put the fate of his people in the hands of an outsider. Even if this outsider seemed to be very loyal to the Burning Legion. If Infernal Affairs did something to the portal, and suddenly closed it when only a third of the Burning Legion's troops had passed through, that would be a huge problem. At this time, the Dragon Guardians of Azeroth were not to be trifled with. Then let's play it safe. 7 days. As long as the Archaerons arrive, the Burning Legion's victory will be irreversible. Duque bowed and replied at the same time. In these 7 days, I need to focus on the construction of the portal, and will not have time to care about other things. I believe that the enemy will find a way to break Azeroth's seal on the magic veins. I hope to strengthen the defenses in this area. Kil'jaeden looked at the Eridar twins with a pair of fiery eyes. I'll leave the protection of the magic veins to you. Yes. The Gemini replied with a lowered head. Infernal Affairs. As long as you open the portal, you will be the one to take the lead. I will give you an additional reward. As long as it suits your status, you can have it. Kil'jaeden was indeed the best at ordering people around. Just as he threw a big stone called overtime on Duque's shoulder, the Gemini immediately hung a carrot to lure him. Duque smiled and did not say anything. Under normal circumstances, it would be a waste for the Gemini to be a guardian. But this was obviously not a normal situation. He knew very well what trump cards the enemy had. Right now he was digging a big hole for the Gemini to jump into. In any case, he had a good reason. I'll let Mannoroth command the battlefield. Infernal Affairs will focus on opening the portal, and the Gemini is the most free. Can you look after the seal for a few days? The Gemini could not find a reason to refuse. After all, once Archimonde arrived, with the Burning Legion's past experience, they would definitely win. In the end, it would become, it's not that we didn't work hard to suppress the bandits, but the bandits have Gundams. Almost at the same time, Tyrant and Malfurion looked at the majestic elven army, their faces full of worry. Tyrant even gritted her teeth. It's impossible to win. Look, our so-called elites can't even stand steadily now, and they actually have to rely on the remaining power of their mortal bodies to fight those huge demons. Malfurion sighed deeply. You're right. An army of 300,000. This was definitely a powerful force to be reckoned with in the mortal world. But after seeing those huge, terrifying demons that looked like they were born to be fighting machines, Tyron no longer had any hope for this army. Now Tyron fell into a deep state of confusion. When the demons came out, the high priestess of the Elun Sisterhood happened to be in Azhara City. Her desperate cries before her death were transmitted to her, and the other priestess through the spiritual network left by the goddess. She really wanted to participate in this battle, but she had not received a response from Elun yet. Malfurion made a decision. No, I want to go to the Emerald Dream. Chapter 1029. The blazing hot wind blew on the ground full of gravel and ashes, rolling up the dust like waves, layer by layer, whistling and blowing into the distance. In the northwest of Azhara, a huge army was slowly advancing along with this gale. 300,000 elves sounded like a lot, but in reality, this was only a small part of the army of the huge Night Elf Empire. Because of the speed of mobilization, Ravenkaze could only gather the lords closest to Azhara. The lords further away needed a month, or even several months to get here. This was not an exaggeration. 10,000 years ago in Azeroth, this was the period when the Night Elf Empire was at its strongest. Kaldorii occupied nearly 80% of the territory of the ancient Kalimdor continent. The former Amani Troll Empire was only left in the northeast corner of the continent, struggling at death's door with Zwaman as a line of defense. The once glorious Gurubashi Empire was split into two parts, Zul, Farik in the southwest and Zul Gurub in the southeast. If the Night Elf Empire mobilized, it was still possible to gather 3 or 4 million troops. Of course, the quality would definitely be uneven. To be able to gather 300,000 people in such a short period of time was already an amazing rallying power of Lord Ravenkaze. Unfortunately, when facing the Burning Legion, Ravenkaze only felt a little. Was there too few people on his side? The demons wreaked havoc everywhere. They burned down every house and forest, slaughtering every living creature within their sight. From afar, there was a flood of hellhounds howling. Behind these hound demons, blue-skinned demon guards also gathered there. When they saw the rows of night elves at the end of their line of sight, they all howled happily. Although chasing and destroying fleeing prey was also a kind of pleasure, large-scale slaughter was what demons loved the most. Today, more innocent people would be killed, more blood would splatter, converge into a river, solidify into a lake. Awoo! After the leading giant hellhound elite let out a chilling cry. The demons advanced towards the neat and orderly line of elves. Ravenkaze nodded. Archers, get ready, a noble shouted. Under the leadership of an archer who had obviously stepped into the realm of heroes, more than 38,000 longbows were raised high, slanting towards the sky. The nobleman tossed a handful of fluff above his palm. Looking at the direction in which the fluff had drifted, the noble continued to shout. Level 3 wind, 10 degrees east. Awoo! Even though they were against the wind, the chaotic howls of the hellhounds as they ran at full speed formed a huge sound wave that pounced towards the elves. Some of the new soldiers who had never been on the battlefield almost couldn't hold their bows steadily, but those experienced marksmen knocked 3 arrows on the bowstrings in one go. The elf noble raised his hand high and looked forward. The group of demons was getting closer and closer, and he suddenly swung his hand down. Shio shio shio. The continuous sound of breaking wind formed a terrifying long sound. Accompanied by the shocking shriek of the Grim Reaper, more than 100,000 arrows formed a huge black cloud that stretched for several kilometers and suddenly rose into the sky. When the flashing arrows reached the highest point, under the effect of gravity, the sharp arrows were like a summer shower, pouring down on the demon's body. From afar, it looked like a gigantic Grim Reaper, opening its arms to embrace the devils. The devils weren't brainless creatures. However, even though they knew that death was in front of them, The burning legion still didn't slow down. The torrential rain of arrows suddenly fell. The devils of the burning legion were indeed demons, but they still had physical bodies. They weren't invincible. The first round of arrows almost completely covered the hellhounds. Some of the hellhounds had so many arrows stuck in their bodies that their corpses couldn't even lie flat on the ground. The hellhounds fell to the ground and died. Nearly 200 Apocalypse guards also fell from the sky. However, the burning legion devils stepped on their comrades' bodies as if they were stepping on a stepping stone that had nothing to do with them. And they passed by at high speed. The hellhounds ignored their dead comrades. In their eyes, there was only greed for the night elves. They roared and continuously sped up with the momentum of participating in a carnival. Damn it! Ravencase cursed. Fire at will. Quick! The hellhound's acceleration exceeded the imagination of this veteran night elf overlord. Usually, even if it was a cavalry charge, with the night elf's hand speed, they could shoot at least 4 to 5 rounds of arrows. However, those damned hellhounds suddenly accelerated and disrupted everything. Fire! Fire at will. The archers gave up on aiming accurately and loosened the bowstrings in their hands almost as soon as they were ready. The arrows of death shot towards the group of devils again, but the effect was obviously not half as effective this time. The hellhound in front of the hellhound agilely made evasive maneuvers with irregular steps, increasing the distance between it and its companion. The demon guards at the back actually raised their huge shields and formed a standard carapace formation. These aren't just beasts. They're practically war machines. A noble beside Ronan roared. They learn too fast. Ravencase ignored this guy. After the third round of shooting, all archers retreat. Infantry to deal with the impact. Mages who can still cast spells cover. Lancers prepare to charge. Your Excellency, Ronan suddenly shouted. Can I participate in the battle? At this time, mage, you can do anything. As long as you don't attack us elves. Go. Ravencase originally wanted to refuse out of pride, but after the magic of the Well of Eternity was cut off, almost all the mages under him became dead dogs. The Great Lord, who was incredibly vexed, answered almost casually. He had no idea how terrifying the pharaoh he had released was. Ronan flashed to a high slope. Below him were 5 rows of infantry. The night elf infantry held the long and narrow kite shields that looked impressive but were useless, forming a shield wall that Ronan looked extremely weak. There were no 3 rows of spears, no reserves. Ronan had no idea how these guys would die if they were attacked by the hellhounds. Knowing that the hellhounds' magic resistance was insanely high, Ronan sighed. He concentrated and cast a spell that he would rarely use in normal times. This was a large-scale spell that he would definitely not be able to use without any equipment. However, he felt the magic amplification from the excellent equipment that the various demon lords of Mount Hyjal had contributed to him. Ronan firmly believed that he could still do it. His eyes narrowed. The ground in front of the burning legion cracked open, rocks exploded, and dust was everywhere. The next moment, from the sky full of dust, a sharp stone wall that was a full kilometer long covered the center of the battlefield from left to right, as if 10,000 large hedgehogs had appeared out of thin air, blocking in front of the hellhounds. Chapter 1030. If the charge of the hellhounds was like a torrent spurting out of a great river, then Ronan's earth spell would be an artificial dam that appeared out of nowhere. Like a row of heavy cannons bombarding the dam, the tide of hellhounds was a perfect performance of what was called raging waves beating the shore. Perhaps the repeated attacks, day after day, year after year, would shatter the reef on the shore. But at this moment, it was only the tide itself that was shattered. All agility-type movements required space to be executed. Even the most agile existence, once it lost the space to make a detour, what awaited it was the most hated, the unfancy collision. The hellhounds at the front instinctively wanted to go around or over. But in the end, they were still pushed to the front by the hellhounds that couldn't stop. And their companions at the front line crashed into sharp stone spikes as if they were driving a pile of piles. Indescribable howls resounded in the middle of the battlefield. On many solid spikes, there were often a dozen or so hellhounds that hadn't completely lost their lives. At this moment, Ronan began to chant the second battlefield spell. The source of all magic. Come and go with my mysterious meaning, and open a path of fire that destroys everything. The purplish-blue arcane energy turned into gorgeous runes that formed dazzling rune ribbons around Ronan, circling his body in a clockwise direction. Supported by a set of dazzling, exquisite equipment, and the special effects of unruly will and other strengthening accessories were fully activated. The little remaining magic power was all compressed and poured into the next attack. 10 seconds later, a huge magic dragon of fire crossed the crowded front of the Hellhounds and flew directly above the group of demon guards that were lined up because of the shield and turtle shell formation. Boom! A huge mushroom cloud rose in the formation of the demon guards, and in the elves' vision, at least 100 demon guards were blown into the sky. More were turned into ashes in the direct hit of the explosion, and the rest were either blown into pieces and scattered, or simply fell to the ground, motionless. The stones on the turf were also blasted away. A boulder fell on a Cerberus, crushing its spine like breaking a twig. The advance of the Burning Legion's main army in the middle had been stopped. These ferocious demons were obviously in a mess. No matter how picky Ravencase was, he could not help but praise Ronan's performance. Good job. The archers made use of this opportunity to fire another volley of arrows at the Hellhounds that were huddled together. A large number of arrows rained down, and the scene became even more chaotic. The night elves cheered. The moon guards looked at Ronan jealously. Ravencase roared at his mages, telling them to act quickly. However, it seemed like the night elf mages were far inferior to Ronan. That's right, an entire team of 500 mages couldn't even compare to Luoning. Having fought on the loads of the Well of Eternity for a long time, the elven mages had inexhaustible magic power. They would subconsciously study their own casting skills instead of expanding their magic circuits, so that they could store and refine more magic power on their own. According to Duque, these guys had frighteningly short mana bars. The elemental magic that descended on the Burning Legion weakened from time to time. A large number of demons fell to the ground, but more demons surged forward. The magic offensive that was supposed to be a suppressive area attack and turn a certain area into an absolute dead zone seemed extremely weak. The central battlefield that Ronan plowed through with his ultimate skill was fine. There were no fortifications around it, and the night elf infantry that directly met the enemy with a shield formation showed a one-sided decline. In front of the more agile and stronger demons, the elven infantry easily made trades that shocked every commander. Many times, it took 5 elven infantry to exchange for the death of a Cerberus. Until this moment, the elven lords felt a little regretful. They should have thought of a way, whether it was spies or thieves, to restore the magic supply of the Well of Eternity before going after the Burning Legion. On the left flank, the Moon Guards led by Illidan were fighting, and the situation was still somewhat manageable. After all, these Moon Guards who chose to support the Lord and rescue the Queen, even if they had lost their magic power, were still highly trained warriors. The right flank was in a difficult situation. At the worst time, even the supreme leader of the Moon Guards, Latuzius, had to fight on the front line. As the Burning Legion further increased their troops, especially after the appearance of the Lord of the Abyss, the Night Elf army showed signs of collapse. Just as the Elven army was on the verge of collapse, a mysterious existence, in a special way, visited the inner city of Azhara, which was under high security. There was a sentry every 3 steps, and a sentry every 5 steps was not enough to describe the security of this place. Around the palace, the elven guards in green armor, armed with spears and swords, carefully looked around. But they were not the core of the security net. Countless Cerberus ran back and forth almost irregularly. There were multiple Void-Eye demons patrolling every important position. Eye Demon, a special demon that could cross space and see very far away, or see through things hidden in the void. At first glance, it was no different from a huge and ferocious eyeball. They just floated in the air, scanning every corner of the inner city of Azhara. With them here, even a hero-level thief like Vanessa could not even think of taking half a step in. Even though the defenses of the Burning Legion were so exaggerated and strict, a special existence still entered. He flew over the Well of Eternity lightly, looked down at the huge pool of black water, and slowly ascended to the tall and majestic forbidden palace that stood on the cliffs of the mountain. When this palace was first built, stones and trees were combined together with magic. Such a miracle touched the hearts of countless people, but now it was daunting. It was another stormy night, and an even more uneasy and evil atmosphere hung around it. The elves did not dare to stare at it, and even if they did, they would quickly look away. Except for the mysterious intruder. Yes. He was Malfurion Stormrage, whose soul had left his body and existed in a strange form between the Emerald Dream and the real world to sneak into the Azhara Palace. Malfurion was caught in a conundrum. He had clearly sensed that an unpredictable, mysterious power was being nurtured in the highest magic tower, but he could not find a way to get in. A three-dimensional magic formation with strong mental attributes surrounded the entire magic tower. At this moment, Malfurion saw a sign that gave him a headache. It was a green arrow. Chapter 1031. Malfurion's first instinct was to think that it was a trap. The enemy had a ghostly fellow who had seen through everything. But Malfurion's second reaction was to think that it was impossible. It was simple, because the green arrowhead was formed from the power of the Emerald Dream. Logically speaking, the Emerald Dream should be a special space unique to Azeroth. Apart from the green dragons, only the druids of the Night Elves had the ability to sneak into the Emerald Dream. In fact, even Malfurion, the first disciple of the demigod Cenarius, was only a half-baked infiltrator. How could the Burning Legion, who had just arrived, have such a skill? This was not a skill that could be easily passed on to outsiders. The demigod Malorn and the moon goddess Elun had given birth to the demigod Cenarius, whose adoptive mother was the green dragon Queen Isra. Relying on this relationship, Cenarius had mastered the technique of sneaking into the Emerald Dream, and thus taught Malfurion and the other first-generation druids how to sneak into the Emerald Dream. Malfurion would never have thought that there would be a monster from 10,000 years in the future, who had only entered the Emerald Dream once and seen the dream attack that Isra had used to attack Nethario. The Wing of Death had actually used the system elf to calculate and figure out how to use dream power. Duque could not easily let his soul wander like Malfurion. After all, entering the Emerald Dream required very strong mental strength. Otherwise, he could do what Malfurion had done and obtain legal entry rights from Isra. Otherwise, he could learn from the King of Nightmares, Savis, and use filthy evil power to forcefully pollute the Emerald Dream before breaking it open and entering it himself. But when it came to the use of various mysterious powers, Malfurion was no match for Duque. Using mental strength to condense mental strength that was similar to dream power, and spread it between the cracks of reality and the Emerald Dream. It was extremely easy. If the situation was different, Malfurion would not have dared to casually enter. He saw a small Chinese character on the bottom right corner of the green arrowhead. None. None. Malfurion's soul suddenly trembled. He immediately realized what it meant. That was what the human named Roddick had said. When he and Tyrant had asked about the existence that had infiltrated the Burning Legion, Roddick had said vaguely, "For Master's safety, I cannot tell you who he is. But he will leave a mark to distinguish between friend and foe. And that mark is none." Malfurion memorized the strange character. Roddick said, "My master was a legendary figure, who could turn the power of darkness into light even though he was cursed by the commander of the Burning Legion. Cadores can choose not to believe him. But if you have no other choice, you might as well consider accepting my master's guidance." At this moment, on one hand, Malfurion was amazed by the formidability of the legendary person who claimed to be Nihility. On the other hand, he realized, to his surprise, that he didn't have many choices. Those eyeball-like abyss devils floating in the void gave him a very bad feeling, as if he would be discovered if he approached. Now he shouldered 300,000 soldiers, and the future of the entire Night Elves. Hesitation or being discovered would directly lead to the defeat of this battle. If Ravenkay's army was completely annihilated, it was unknown if he could organize a second large-scale army. After all, Queen Azhara had a righteous status. If the queen put down her pride and even promised her people, how many Night Elves would still have the will to fight? Malfurion didn't dare to imagine. He could only take the gamble. His soul traveled through the half-illusory green dream, wandering in the gap between reality and illusion. Following the arrow, he entered the palace. In the beginning, he was more cautious. He spread out his senses in the dream to see if there were enemies in the direction of the big X. Very soon, he almost fell for it. The eyes of the two eye devils turned to his sensory tentacles and almost grabbed his spiritual power. This scared Malfurion quite a bit. Even if he was unwilling, he could only follow the instructions and continue walking. Those green dream imprints were very exquisite. Apart from directions, there were also signs such as no passage, the road ahead is narrower, and watch your head. There was even a patrol countdown. Even the Eye Devil's vision range and patrol route were marked out for Malfurion. Just what position did this nun have in the Burning Legion? This wasn't the kind of information a squad leader or something like that could have. Malfurion was secretly shocked as he continued walking. After many twists and turns, he even had to take a detour of more than 200 meters to avoid an Eye Devil that was in an excellent position, and go through a straight path that was only 10 meters long. Just like that, Malfurion's wandering soul finally arrived in front of a mage tower without any mishaps. He suddenly recognized that it was that bastard Savi's mage tower. Just as he was about to follow the signs and enter the mage tower, Malfurion suddenly froze. He saw 3 huge signs outside the mage tower's gate. Along the way, he had basically distinguished the signs that this nun had set for each level of demon. For example, the yellow sign was for ordinary demons, and the silver dragon sign was for rare elites. But here, Malfurion saw 3 completely different signs. He recognized one of them. It was the sign that represented Breaking Dawn mages in the Kaldari Empire. It obviously represented the Queen's chief advisor, Savi's. The other 2 were demon shadows with the slender appearances of women. They held magic staffs and had 2 black suns on their heads. Inside were white skulls with red eyes. It was a very eye-catching sign. 2 Lord-level great demons? Or are they succubi or warlocks? Malfurion knew that the biggest trouble had come. He had no choice but to brace himself and enter. Light and shadow overlapped, and there were psychedelic colors everywhere. Powerful spatial seals and all kinds of magic seals caused the spacious mage tower to be left with only a few narrow paths. If Malfurion wasn't a special existence that couldn't even be considered a ghost in the real world, he wouldn't have been able to reach this place. Malfurion floated in the mage tower, searching for anything he could see that looked like a seal. He had to hurry. With every passing second, more night elves were sacrificed. The only reason was that Malfurion couldn't destroy the seal that blocked the Well of Eternal Life's magic vein faster. Although Malfurion couldn't tell how fast time passed just by looking at the surroundings in the Emerald Dream, he knew that time passed much slower in the dream than in the outside world. He had entered a deep sleep last night before the army set off. The army had probably already started fighting. Chapter 1032. In Savi's Mage Tower, Savi's once again heard the teachings of the great god Sargeras. Well done, Savi's. You need to be patient and don't make any mistakes. When my most powerful warrior, Archaron, arrives, the perfect, clean world filled with great evil energy that you've been waiting for will soon arrive. Savi's was deeply encouraged. Sargeras's grand and powerful voice turned into a torrent of excitement, spreading to every inch of his body. At the same time, in the domain of the Emerald Dream, Malfurion did not even dare to breathe. He did not dare to move forward, nor did he dare to retreat, for fear that he would produce strong emotional fluctuations or something else that would attract the attention of that terrifying existence. The time that felt like it was taking forever seemed even longer as he waited in a trance. With great difficulty, the powerful will with the yellow-green light finally faded from the mage tower. Then Malfurion heard Savi's laughter. Hoo-hoo. Ha-ha. Ha-ha-ha-ha. Ha-ha. Savi's covered half of his face with his right hand to hide his twisted smile. But Malfurion still saw it. He saw the bulging eyeball exposed between the index and middle fingers of his right hand. What kind of eyeball was that? It was bloodshot, filled with savagery and madness, mixed with indifference towards life. What made Malfurion's heart palpitate the most was that the eyeball turned and stared at where Malfurion was. Impossible? Malfurion's soul trembled violently. This was definitely not a coincidence, because the gap between reality and the dream was rather tricky. It was the opposite of where a magic lamp was. Most people would not look where the strong light was coming from. If it was a coincidence, then how could Savi's face and eyes turn 120 degrees, and then stare up 60 degrees to see here? Come out! Savi's yelled fiercely. I didn't say anything just now because I didn't want the god to know that I'm the kind of idiot who was entrusted with an important task, but didn't even know the enemy had sneaked into my mage tower. At that moment, Malfurion deeply regretted it. Damn it, how stupid I was. Malfurion had heard stories about Savi's eyes before. People said that Savi's eyes could see the shadows of shadows, but he dismissed that as a myth. The pair of eyes that allowed Chief Advisor Savi's to observe the power of natural witchcraft also allowed him to notice the souls floating around him. Seeing how smug Savi's was, Malfurion couldn't help but have the urge to turn around and leave at all costs. Too late. Savi's raised his right hand high and clenched it in the air. Malfurion immediately felt that the space around him was trembling violently. It was obviously not a regular spell, nor was it some damn evil energy. It was a power of the same origin as the Emerald Dream. Dream? No. That was a nightmare. The black spiritual matter made of infinite nightmares turned into a ball-shaped cage that was at least 30 meters in diameter. It opened a giant mouth that looked very sharp and bit at Malfurion. Not good. Malfurion intended to launch a counterattack immediately, but a strange being reacted even faster than him. It screamed and lunged. Right in front of Malfurion. It was a special existence that lurked in the dream like Malfurion, and it seemed to be a soul. Unlike Malfurion, it was more like a scapegoat that had been hidden in a crack in the dream in advance and thrown out when certain conditions were triggered. If Savi's attack was a trap, then this unknown thing was more like a scapegoat specially used to destroy the trap. Malfurion was tongue-tied as he watched the black shadow being swallowed by Savi's attack. Savi's was fooled by this strange being that he had caught. Rather than saying that it was some monster hidden in the dream, it was better to say that it was some kind of spiritual amalgamation with a strong will. It wasn't even a soul. Savi's released his spirit and touched the pitch-black spirit. He withdrew it almost immediately because he saw some fragmented fragments. There was once a young arcanist who participated in the great Lord Savi's experiment and met with misfortune. It's actually the amalgamation of some stupid magic apprentice's resentment? Savi's couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Have the great god Sargeras and Lord Infernal Affairs been giving me too much pressure recently? They're making me nervous. Endless research into arcane spells naturally came with all kinds of costs. Savi's turned his wrist and clenched his fist, instantly annihilating the spiritual amalgamation that wasn't even a soul. Savi shook his head and walked out of the room. At this time, if Malfurion still had a body, he would definitely be soaked in cold sweat, as if he had just been fished out of the water. Only those who had personally experienced what had just happened knew how thrilling it was. If it wasn't for that perfect and ingenious spiritual amalgamation, it would have been Malfurion who had just been caught. The one who had just been caught would have been him, Malfurion. Never underestimate a mage tower. As the most thorough home field of a powerful wizard, a mage tower didn't just mean that it could greatly increase the power of the wizard who was the master. It also had all kinds of targeted defenses. Once Malfurion was discovered, even the dream space might not be able to protect him. The high concentration of magical elements was enough to cause spatial disorder. If he didn't hide in the deeper layers of the dream world in time, he would probably be forcibly beaten out of the dream space. That would really be the end of him. Malfurion couldn't help but think of the nothing that had helped him. The route had been chosen by this Mr. Mole, so it was hard for Malfurion not to associate this spiritual amalgamation with Mr. Nothing when a life-saving straw had appeared at this time and place. It was a pity that Malfurion didn't understand Chinese. Otherwise he would definitely associate Nothing with the Lord Infernal Affairs that Savi's had mentioned. After Savi's left, Malfurion found the target he had been searching for all this time. The seal that controlled the magic branch of the Well of Eternity. It had appeared in the form of a talisman shield. Malfurion could clearly sense that the numerous torrents of magical power that passed through the Mage Tower all had a small branch that was connected to this talisman shield. Malfurion was ready to move. But at this moment he seemed to hear Tyrande calling out to him in his daze. "Come back. Before you are discovered. Come back to us." No. Malfurion firmly refused in his heart. He wanted to complete his mission, to save his people, to save his world. The talisman shield had to be removed. Chapter 1033. Malfurion. The voice from the depths of his soul grew clearer. Malfurion knew that it was Tyrande calling him from beside his soulless body. That was the only way her voice could travel such a long distance and echo in his ears. It was Tyrande pleading with him not to be rash. Malfurion focused his mind and ignored Tyrande's call. He floated in a corner and continued to stay still, only spreading out his spirit sense slightly. Savi stood in the room next door, his attention focused on the portal that was emitting dark energy. It was a small portal that had been solidified. From time to time, some demons of average size would enter Azeroth through it. After passing through the portal, they would line up neatly and leave the wizard tower through a pre-designed passage. The rebels are resisting very fiercely. We need a stronger army. Savi seemed to be discussing with a certain lord of the Burning Legion. The current situation was still in Malfurion's favor. If Savi stared at the vortex for a few more minutes, Malfurion believed that he could quickly complete his mission and leave safely. Malfurion floated towards the runic shield, already thinking of how to destroy it. The more intricate the magic circuit, the more fragile it was. As long as he did not break the defensive measures, a few simple changes would be enough. As he advanced, he could no longer hear Tyrande's voice. This either meant that Tyrande allowed him to do this, or the high elemental concentration in the wizard tower had caused the mysterious connection between him and his body to be severed. Either way, he could not turn back now. Malfurion looked through the dream at Savi's, who was behind the walls of the wizard tower filled with magic circuits. He then approached the runic shield with his own strength. He was prepared to completely change the internal composition of the runic shield. This intricate seal had taken the efforts of 8 Breaking Dawn wizards and 10 years of hard work. If it was destroyed, he imagined that even with Queen Azhara's manpower, it would take at least several months for it to be repaired. If it was done skillfully and smoothly, the runic shield's defensive formation would not react for a short period of time until the runic shield completely collapsed and the branch vein of the Well of Eternity started flowing again. At that time, he had already completed the destruction and left cleanly. In the dream world, Malfurion couldn't directly affect the real world. After confirming that nobody was paying attention to him, Malfurion cast a spell to bring his soul closer to the material world. At this moment, he was no different from the wandering souls that wandered the world after death. Malfurion began his spell. What he was summoning now was the power of the world, the power of nature. He used this power to reassemble the talisman. This new form would negate the purpose of the talisman and cause it to disappear. The talisman shield trembled. He was about to succeed. Success was close at hand. Malfurion, who was still young, could barely hold back the ecstasy in his heart. He was far from the steady druid 10,000 years later. For the Night Elves, Malfurion was still very young at this moment. I'm going to be the hero who saved Cadores. He had forgotten what Cenarius had taught him. The closer he was to success, the more careful he had to be. He didn't even notice the 2 voluptuous, evil-looking female bodies that appeared in the void behind his soul. There's a rat. A magical rat. It sounded like 2 long and slow sentences, but they were compressed into the shortest syllable at the same time and pierced into Malfurion's soul directly, allowing him to hear every note of the 2 sentences clearly, and even the mockery in them. Oh no! Malfurion suddenly realized that the close distance had become the farthest distance. Darkness and fire. 2 powerful forces burst out of thin air, and forcibly dispelled his force of nature. All his efforts to influence the charm shield were in vain. More terrifyingly, Malfurion sensed that the space around him was becoming heavy. If he could not return to the domain of the Emerald Dream in the next second, his soul would be confined in the narrow space. That's right. Every great demon was an expert at playing with souls. Malfurion couldn't imagine what would happen to his soul if it fell into the hands of the great demons. Was he going to fail completely? Malfurion didn't even dare to imagine how Savis and the Burning Legion would fortify the defenses here after this failure. The Emerald Dream was not invincible. He couldn't use it to sneak in again. After the Night Elves' resistance was slaughtered, it was meaningless to discuss whether the other Night Elves could regain the power of the Well of Eternity. Was he really going to fail completely? Malfurion's entire soul felt like it was frozen due to extreme fear. At the very end, Malfurion suddenly sensed something. It was a seed. Ordinary seeds couldn't attract his attention, but this was the seed of the Tree of Life. He would never mistake it for someone else. Even though the seed felt completely dead and its life force had been completely devoured by the power of darkness, the Tree of Life got its name because of its endless life force. As long as there was an external injection of life force, and as long as the seed was preserved, it could be reborn. Malfurion brazenly activated Wild Growth. Originally, this was just a druid's recovery spell, but when it was used on the seed of the Tree of Life, it had another effect. Caught off guard. When a seed germinated, grew, and turned into a towering tree in 1/100th of a second, anyone would be dumbfounded. The Tree of Life that had suddenly emerged after receiving all the magic from a powerful druid immediately turned into a human form, according to Malfurion's will. It punched out at the two female demons who looked like they were not to be trifled with. This bought Malfurion the most precious time, allowing him to concentrate the last of his natural power on the rune shield. However, when he was about to destroy the rune shield, a sudden fear descended upon him. Malfurion's soul began to tremble uncontrollably. "You won't touch this rune shield." A terrifying voice appeared in his heart. "You don't want to do this. You just want to serve me, worship me." Chapter 1034. The voice was so loud that it felt as if he was surrounded by giant bells that were as tall as two people. Just the sound waves alone were enough to shatter his soul. He could not resist it at all. The horrifying sound waves easily crashed into Malfurion's spiritual world. Even his soul felt numb. Malfurion tried his best not to succumb to the voice. Roddick and the others had already told him what kind of misfortune would befall everyone if he were to enter Azeroth. He used to think that these mysterious visitors were exaggerating the terror of Sargeras, the leader of the Burning Legion. Only after experiencing it for himself would he understand that the sins released by the hundreds of thousands of demons that had entered this world paled in comparison. Not even a 10,000th of what Sargeras was capable of. "No, I won't serve you, Sargeras." In the past, the gentle druid was almost roaring these words in his spiritual world. Sargeras was too far away from this world. Although he was terrifying, his influence was limited. The druid was a powerhouse in the spiritual realm. With his strong willpower and long training in the Emerald Dream, Malfurion finally broke free from the whirlpool of thoughts. Malfurion could feel the terrifying anger that came from those eyes after crossing the endless void. At the same time, he understood that the evil will from the distorted void could not affect him in any way other than attacking his spiritual world. Malfurion tried his best to focus and ignore Sargeras' existence. He was only thinking about what failure would mean for the Night Elves and the entire world. Aha! Giving up on chanting the incantation, Malfurion's soul roared angrily. That was the trembling of nature. It was a roar against the power of darkness after contacting the wrath of nature. "Stop him!" Savis, who had appeared at the door, shouted. In fact, Savis had rushed back as soon as he sensed that something was wrong. Be it him or the Eridar Gemini, they were both a step too slow. The Tree of Life seed had consumed almost all of Malfurion's magic power. However, no one had expected that the mini Tree of Life would nourish Malfurion at the last moment after it finished growing. A wisp of inconspicuous green light did not trigger the protective shield, and directly filled the inside of the spell shield. The next moment, almost every being in Azhara felt a strong tremor from the Well of Eternity. Boom! It was a loud roar that sounded like a dam breaking. The dark water of the Well of Eternity, which had calmed down for a long time, boiled again. Near the walls of the well, in 8 directions east, west, south, north, and southeast, suddenly appeared 8 large whirlpools that could easily swallow a house. At this moment, Best Actor Duque, who was presiding over the opening ceremony of the portal in the Mage Tower in the center of Azhara's Forbidden Palace, had a perfectly timed expression of shock. Those idiots! Who was he referring to as an idiot? Whoever was responsible for guarding the talisman shield was a dereliction of duty and a fool. Recently, Duque had been maintaining his shadow form. Now he directly turned into a thick cloud of black smoke and rushed out at high speed. This was one of the Shadow Priest's signature skills, Dissipate. Duque's Dissipate was fundamentally different from the Dissipate of ordinary priests. When he infused his entire body with the power of shadow, not only could he turn himself into pure shadow matter and remove all shackles on him, but he also had the effect of accelerating his charge. Perhaps this was the additional benefit of becoming a great Void Lord. His vision was black and white, but with the help of the system elf, Duque could still see his surroundings clearly. Door after door and scenery after scenery flashed past him at high speed. He could not hear the sound of the wind, nor did he have any sense of taste or smell. The only thing that fell into Duque's eyes was Malfurion, who was highlighted by the system. At this moment, Malfurion was in a huge trouble. If it was him in the original history, he would only encounter Savis this time. According to the script, he could totally escape without any danger. Unfortunately, because he was kicked into the twisting nether by an irresponsible space dragon king, he ended up with 2 demon lords guarding the talisman shield. At this moment, Malfurion was in a desperate situation. The twins also knew that things were not looking good. Jaden was generous to his subordinates, but the prerequisite was that they could complete the mission he gave them. On the other hand, if they could not complete the mission, especially a mission that did not seem particularly difficult, that would really be laughable. Guarding the talisman shield, ensuring that the Well of Eternity's mana supply to the giant portal, and thus ensuring that Archimonde and even Sargeras would descend. Everything was linked. No matter what the reason was, messing up was messing up. The twins did not dare to imagine what kind of punishment they would receive. The only thing they could do now was to quickly catch the guy who caused the destruction before Jaden's thunderous rage descended. At least this could make up for their mistakes. Otherwise, their positions as lords would come to an end. The power struggle within the Burning Legion was far more terrifying than outsiders could imagine. They were also not irreplaceable. For example, the Sylvanas had the ability to kick them out of their positions. What race was the Sylvanas? Perhaps no one reacted to this name, but the most famous representative of the Sylvanas was Mother Shiraz, who guarded the Black Temple in the future and tortured countless players. That's right. She was ambitious and devoted to ruling over all the female demons in the Burning Legion. She had 6 arms. Thinking about this, the Erida Geminis also went crazy. Envelop him, Shadow. Saloras waved her hand. Devour him, Flames. Elises shouted. With the twins and Savi's magical black eyes, even if Malfurion was more ghostly than a ghost, he would not be able to get away with it. The Emerald Dream, as the name suggested, was a dream. Dreaming required one to relax mentally and enter the magical state of dreaming. Malfurion, who was not very familiar with the technique, needed time to re-enter the Emerald Dream. In order to destroy the talisman shield, his soul completely entered the real world. Facing the fierce attacks of the 2 demon lords, he instinctively raised his hand, seeking help from the air and wind. The power of nature and the power of shadows and flames collided in midair, causing a loud explosion. Fortunately, they were inside the Mage Tower. Since the Mage Tower could not detect Malfurion, it automatically activated the magic shield and became a useless teammate. That was how Malfurion escaped. Chapter 1035. But he would not be so lucky the next time. Savis charged at Malfurion. The artificial eye emitted black energy and hit Malfurion's soul. Woo! The dark power was so violent that Malfurion could not imagine what would have happened if he had been hit by the joint attack of two demon lords that were even more powerful than this one. Malfurion was almost in a panic. Basically, he dared to rush forward as long as there was no barrier of high-density elements in the direction he came from. He rushed through 3 thick walls in a single breath and rushed straight out of the Mage Tower. The Eredar twins had gone all out. Their surging magic power condensed into all kinds of spells and chased after Malfurion crazily. The power of shadow and flame was initially blocked by the barrier of the Mage Tower. Perhaps the violent magic power broke through the barrier. Or perhaps Savis realized that if he didn't close the barrier, he would only be harming himself and the Gemini. In the next moment, the twins' combined attack easily blew up 3 layers of walls, and even a small teleportation portal that they passed by, shooting straight at Malfurion, who was outside of the Mage Tower. Despair. Malfurion was really in despair. His despair even crossed the void, and was directly reflected in the body placed in Fort Raven. Looking at Malfurion, who was twitching and pale, and then stained with a trace of darkness, how could Tyron not know that Malfurion's soul was being attacked by dark energy? Tyron's face paled as she screamed. No! Malfurion! In the void, Malfurion, who had exhausted his magic power and could no longer hide, knew that he was done for. No matter how he dodged, he could not avoid the 2 magic attacks that were still under the control of the opponent's will. In the next instant, he would be struck, and then his soul would scatter, completely vanishing from this world. Farewell, Tyrant. In the darkest despair, Malfurion closed his eyes and waited for the final moment to come. Boom. The massive shadow and flame energy engulfed the entire plaza outside the Mage Tower, even hitting many of the demon soldiers who had just left the Mage Tower. The 3-meter-tall demon guards swayed like leaves in a storm. The aftermath of the berserk mana shattered the walls of the Forbidden Palace in the distance, and 2 shadow arrows struck down the night elf wizards who were standing guard at the entrance. This caused a huge commotion. Screams and screams could be heard everywhere. There were even moon guards shouting, "The traitors have reached the city." After closing his eyes, Malfurion's chest was fluctuating on his translucent soul, as if he were breathing irregularly. In fact, it was just a subconscious movement. As a spirit, he did not need to breathe. However, the will that still existed told him that he had not been completely destroyed by that terrifying joint attack. Opening his eyes, Malfurion suddenly found himself in an even worse situation. No, Malfurion was truly desperate this time, because he suddenly found that his soul was grasped by a black hand. He was taken prisoner. A few seconds later, the Erida twins and Savis arrived at the same time. Logically speaking, it was a good thing that this ghostly destroyer had been caught. Unfortunately, neither Savis nor the twins were happy at all, because the one who had caught the despicable infiltrator was the person they wanted to see the most, the mysterious and powerful Great Lord of the Spies. Dark energy extended from the palm of Duque, who had returned to his human form, and turned into a huge black hand that firmly grasped Malfurion's soul. There was a frosty expression on Duque's well-defined dark face, as if he was saying, "Look at what you've done." If Duque had reprimanded the 3 of them right from the start, they might have felt better, but Duque did not say a word. This silent pressure caused them to tremble with fear. The clear sky suddenly turned as dark as ink. The will of the Demon King Sargeras had descended once more. A translucent image that was even larger than the entire 7-story Mage Tower appeared in front of all the surrounding demons and elves. It was obvious that Sargeras was furious. Otherwise, he would not have used such a huge amount of mana to project his image. "Kill Jaden. Look at what the idiots under you have done." With that, Sargeras' figure disappeared on the spot. Disappearing did not mean that this matter was over. On the contrary, this was just the beginning, because CEO Sargeras' words had set the tone for this matter. As expected, the moment CEO Sargeras' will left, Kill Jaden arrived. His furious voice shook the Eredar twins and Savis so much that they vomited blood. This was not an adjective. They really vomited blood. The punishment from their souls made the twins of Erida spit out a mouthful of blood that was filled with magic power. It was hard to tell what color it was. Trash. All of you are trash. The Void Fleet has been assembled. Archimonde is ready to descend, and all the schedules are fixed. Sailoras. Aleshas. With the two of you watching, I actually let a low-level creature destroy the shield of the Well of Eternity. What use do I have for you two trash? Kil'jaeden was a very patient great demon. He could spend hundreds of years to solve a problem that violence could not solve. On the other hand, he was also a perfectionist. He could tolerate accidents, but he definitely could not tolerate his subordinates making such a low-level mistake. As he roared, the punishment from their souls increased. The twins of Erida, who were originally full of feminine charm, were rolling on the ground in pain as he roared. Every inch of their skin looked as if it had been cut by a small knife, and it opened up on its own. On their smooth hands and feet, there were only bloody lumps of flesh. There were no screams, because their voices had been sealed. Their sexy lips were open to the extreme, and only a silent cry was left. Savis, who was beside them, knelt on the ground, trembling. This terrifying torture lasted for a full 30 minutes. Every time the twin souls or bodies were about to collapse, a few Erida dark acolytes who were summoned would cast dark healing on the twins to heal the wounds on their bodies. Then it would be the next round of torture. Even if you suffer in pain for tens of thousands of years, you will not be able to make up for your sins. Kil'jaeden was still angry. At this time, Du, who knew that Malfurion would come to cause trouble in history, suggested to let the twins guard the shield, and cause the twins to bleed. He stood up without a change in expression. Respected Lord Kil'jaeden, actually, it might not be impossible to catch up to the army's plan. Chapter 1036. In the air, Kil'jaeden's projection, which was only the size of a human, turned around. He had no pupils, only a pair of eyes, that were spewing flames. Yet everyone could tell that Kil'jaeden was interested. Not just him, even the Eridar Gemini, who were curled up on the ground, were suddenly attracted by a sense of disbelief. Even though they were extremely weak, dizzy and spiritually tired, the Gemini struggled to raise their heads and listen to the conversation between Duque and Kil'jaeden. Infernal affairs. Do you know what you're saying? This has nothing to do with you. I know. But the Eridar Gemini's failure is Lord Kil'jaeden's failure, which is also my failure. I believe that I have the ability to make up for all of this. Duke said in a seemingly humble manner. Kil'jaeden's projection narrowed his eyes. What do you need? Power. The Burning Legion has absolute power in Azhara City. This includes interrogating the captives, building the teleportation portal, setting up the new defense system, and the power to dispatch all the lords of the demons. Duque said calmly. In exchange, I'm willing to use my soul as a bet to build a teleportation portal that can accommodate Lord Archimonde's arrival within 7 days. Oh, if Kil'jaeden had only been angry before, he was now filled with boundless joy. You can rebuild that complicated rune shield and speed up the construction of the teleportation portal? That thing isn't difficult. It'll take 2 days at most. Including debugging and gathering the mana of the Well of Eternity, it'll take a total of 4 days. And I said before that I only need 3 days to build the teleportation portal. In other words, if you leave everything to me, 7 days. No more, no less. Duque's words were resolute, powerful and filled with absolute confidence. Even Kil'jaeden couldn't help but be moved by this boldness. Kil'jaeden definitely wasn't having a good time. If planet Azeroth was an unimportant low-level planet, it didn't matter if the attack failed. He could just send another legion over later. Anything that involved the creation titans of the Pantheon was definitely not simple. In the entire Burning Legion, only he, Archimonde, and Sargeras knew how important Azeroth was. Now that the Eridar Gemini had caused trouble, he couldn't absolve himself from the blame. Archimonde, who had always been at odds with him, wouldn't be nice to him, and he wouldn't be able to withstand Sargeras' anger. Once the plan was delayed, even if the Burning Legion succeeded, Archimonde would still be above him. Although he and Archimonde were both ministers, they had always been competitors as the 3 magnates of Eridar. Kil'jaeden was definitely not happy of him acknowledging a grandson of Azeroth. The current situation forced kills and kills. king of king, of. As long as you can complete the construction of the teleportation gate on time, not only will I double the reward I promised you and promote you to a high lord, but I will also grant you 3 special requests that are worthy of this contribution. As long as you can complete the construction of the portal on time, not only will I double the reward that I promised you and promote you to a high-rank lord, I can also grant you 3 special requests that are worthy of this contribution. Of course, I will never tolerate those who mess up the plan, even if they are old subordinates that have followed me for many years. I promise to complete the mission. Duque promised solemnly. At this moment, Duque's heart was filled with ecstasy. He was so happy that his face was practically covered with a smile. This time his happiness wasn't fake. He was really over the moon. Burning Legion, hast thou at last put thy neck upon my noose? The ill-intentioned Dew sneered. In Kil'jaeden's eyes, Duque's agitated and cold smile had another meaning: ambition. Kil'jaeden smiled too. Ambition was definitely a good thing for a Void Lord. It wasn't that you didn't have ambition. It was that your strength couldn't match up to your ambition. As of a superior, the last thing he was afraid of was a power struggle between his subordinates. The Burning Legion was an army of destruction made up of the cruelest and most violent races in the universe. It wasn't a charity. If you didn't have some means and strength, you deserved to be swallowed whole. Kil'jaeden glanced coldly at the kneeling Gemini and Savi's. He didn't care about Savi's and directly punished the Gemini's soul. After torturing the 2 pitiful creatures to death, he said to Duque, "Infernal affairs, I'll leave the Gemini to you. If you think they're still useful, let them redeem themselves. If they're useless, you can deal with them yourself." After saying that, Duque noticed an exquisite bracelet flying out from another portal not far away. As soon as he received it, Duque understood what it was. This thing was like the band-tightening spell that Tang Xing used to control Sun Wukong. With just a thought, he could activate the spell formation in the bracelet. By torturing the Gemini's soul, he could make the Eridar Gemini regret being born into this world. Of course, it wasn't impossible to kill the Gemini. However, doing so would definitely be disadvantageous to Duque. It was very simple. Did Duque have horns on his head? Did he have 3 whiskers on his chin that looked like ding-ding? Did he have a tail? Did he have hooves? F***CK, you're in the Burning Legion, and you're executing the elites of the Eridar tribe. What's the meaning of this? Before opening the portal, Duque could do anything to the Eridar Gemini, but he couldn't kill them. Once they were killed, Kil'jaeden would definitely focus all his attention on Duque. That wouldn't be fun. Understood. Duque lowered his head deeply. Kil'jaeden's consciousness dissipated. The surrounding air returned to its usual calmness. If it wasn't for the traces of destruction left behind by the shadows and flames, no one would have thought that an intense chase had just happened here. Duque glanced at Malfurion's soul, which was still in his dark power palm, and said coldly, "Be quiet, despicable night elves. Otherwise, I'll cut your soul into pieces and scatter your soul fragments to every filthy place in the world. Finally, I'll give your soul core to the Burning Legion Lord, and let him deal with you according to his whims." Malfurion was terrified and in despair. Enveloped by Duque's dark power, he couldn't connect to the Emerald Dream no matter how hard he tried. Duque turned around and faced Savi's. "Take me to see the talisman shield." "Yes." Savi's lowered his noble head deeply. On the other side, due to the recovery of the mana supply from the Well of Eternity, the Night Elves who had been in an extremely weak position just now launched a counterattack. Chapter 1037. Just a moment ago, the Night Elves were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered, trembling in front of the endless demon army. Lord Ravencay's face was ashen. He had overestimated the combat power of the elves after losing their magic, and underestimated the power of the Burning Legion. On any battlefield, one of the two was enough to be fatal, not to mention both. If they were not completely wiped out, then they were really lucky. In just an hour of battle, more than 8 elven nobles of the rank of Earl and above had died in battle, and there were countless lesser nobles below them. This included the leader of the Moon Guards, Latuzius. Latuzius was a very powerful elf. He practiced both magic and martial arts, and his abilities could be said to be invincible among the elves. His opponent was an Apocalypse Guard Lord who was more than 5 meters tall, and had a tan body. In terms of pure martial arts, Latuzius was even slightly superior to the Demon Lord. The problem was his physique. No matter how strong Latuzius was, he was still a night elf. After evolving from trolls to night elves, the elves obtained the powerful spellcasting ability that they dreamed of, but in exchange, they lost the insane regenerative ability of the trolls. The Apocalypse Lord could take dozens of attacks that would be fatal to mortals, but unfortunately, the night elves could only take one. Therefore, powerful demons often had more opportunities to make mistakes than elves. Latuzius made a fatal mistake. In the beginning, he had been paying attention and told himself not to use magic. When the battle entered the most intense stage, he forgot about this and subconsciously looked for an opening and chanted a spell. When the spell had no effect, he realized that without the magic support of the Well of Eternity, he could not instantly cast such a powerful spell. This cost him his life. The backlash from the magic power circuit slowed his movements by a beat. As a result, the Demon Lord opposite him seized the opportunity, and used his green crescent-like fist blades to split Latuzius into two. The death of the Moon Guard Lord was a huge blow to the morale of the Moon Guards who had defected to Lord Ravencase. Fortunately, Illidan's bravery made up for all this. Holding a scimitar that the elves rarely used, Illidan rushed over with incredible speed. He moved so fast that the naked eye couldn't follow him, circling around the Apocalypse Lord like a butterfly, slashing at it non-stop. If Illidan was just a fly, he might have been slapped to death like Latuzius. However, Illidan was able to sneak into the Moon Guards because of his dual cultivation. Mana Ignition. This was a skill that would cause all mages a headache. It was known as the enemy of mages. Not only did he burn the Doom Lord's mana, Illidan also paid attention to destroying the magic nodes between the Doom Lord's magic circuits. Destroying the connection between multiple magic circuits would result in the imbalance of the opponent's magic power, and the damage would be multiplied. Finally, after a few rounds, Illidan yelled out, "Die, demon!" He beheaded the low-level Doomsday Lord's head as a trophy of war. He also took the enemy's fist blades, which were flickering with a strange yellow-green light. "Is that a Xenos? Ha! From now on, you will be called the Warblade of Azeroth. Ha ha ha!" Illidan held the two incomplete Warblades of Azeroth in one hand and raised the hideous head of the Apocalypse Lord Azeroth high up in the air. He shouted, "The enemy's Lord Azeroth has been killed by me." Illidan's storm rage. Oh! The surrounding night elves' morale was instantly boosted. The more disadvantaged they were, the more they needed a hero. Illidan could have become a hero on this battlefield, even if he lost this battle. However, just as Illidan was filled with joy and thought that he would be favored by Tyrande when he returned, something unexpected happened. It was a good thing for all the elves. It was a bad thing for Illidan, because along with an invisible and untouchable wave that suddenly swept through the entire place, the Heavenly Dragon King's body suddenly trembled. Every elf's face was filled with uncontrollable ecstasy. The demon, who was showing his cruel and bloodthirsty face, could not understand why these elves, who had almost given up and were purely fighting for their lives, suddenly became so excited. Soon they understood. More than half of the elves' hands lit up with magic. That's right. The Well of Eternity's magic supply to the branch vein had been restored. On the Kalimdor continent, where the Well of Eternity's magic branch vein was spread over half of the continent, magic was the true main melody. This was also the biggest reason why Kadorii could dominate half of the continent and beat the trolls and other races like dogs. The next moment, the entire atmosphere was shaken by the pouring of all kinds of magic. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Countless rays of magic light streaked across the sky like a meteor shower, smashing into the heads of the Burning Legion's demons. Even if there were many Cerberus in the Burning Legion, so what? Countless icicles fell from the sky. When the elemental materialization turned into physical attacks, that was when the Cerberus fell. Illidan was supposed to be the only star on this battlefield, but now there was Ronan. That's right. Ronan actually leveled up. On this chaotic battlefield. As a strong-willed mage, Ronan never lacked talent or patience, but opportunity. Compared to Chidori, who was used to borrowing external forces, he always insisted on using his own magic to fight. This was decided by the fact that human mages in later generations did not have a good source of magic. Therefore, he specialized in arcane magic, and as a basic magic circuit, he was stronger than any other mage of the same age. In order to fight on the battlefield, Ronan kept clearing out all the magic in his body. Relying on the magic recovery from his exquisite equipment, he used up all his magic as soon as it recovered. Under such extreme pressure, he had unintentionally or unintentionally strengthened his control over magic. Because of the lack of magic, he needed to use magic more efficiently. Because magic recovery was not easy, he pursued the most cost-effective ratio between magic and used the most suitable magic on the enemy that could affect the overall situation the most. Ronan, who was already on the verge of leveling up, waited with the Night Elves for the Well of Eternity's magic to arrive. Just by himself, he transferred away the magic that could supply 100,000 Earth mages. In the air behind Ronan, thousands of magic circles suddenly lit up with a bright purple and blue light. The brilliance of his magic overshadowed the entire Ravencay's mage team. If the mage team's magic rain was a gentle breeze and drizzle, then the power of Ronan's move was the doomsday storm that could destroy the entire world. Arcane Missile Storm. Chapter 1038. Every spell formation appeared out of thin air, pouring out mana to strike the enemy before disappearing. It was more dazzling than fireworks, more solemn than death. Compared to the demon army that only brought slaughter and destruction, Ronan's attacks were more like the art of war. At some point, the Ravencay's mages were stunned and stopped what they were doing. Even though they had recovered their mana to the maximum, the combined damage of their entire team of 4 mages could not even compare to a tenth of Ronan's. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The seemingly endless arcane missiles whistled through the air, forming a continuous super long sound. The light released when the arcane elements hit the demons drew out a gigantic magic scroll. Using magic as the paint, and death as the embellishment, the huge Burning Legion vanguard completely became the background in front of Ronan, a newly advanced Breaking Dawn mage. Endless explosions rang out, blowing up thousands of pieces of evil demons' limbs of all sizes. Ronan used his arcane missile storm to plow the battlefield from left to right, front to back, over and over again. Every arcane missile had the power of a 7-pound cannon. It was like the sky was falling. It was like the earth was turning upside down. Every night elf became a witness to this miracle with their eyes wide open and their tongues tied. It wasn't that every Breaking Dawn great wizard with unlimited mana was as terrifying as they were. It was precisely because Ronan came from the magical holy land of humans, the Dalajan, that he developed the habit of accurately calculating the mana required for each arcane missile. It was also because he learned from Duque, who inherited the name of the Hundred-Handed Reaper, that he could master the super multicasting technique that no one else in history had ever mastered. Moreover, he had been training his skills day after day, year after year, and was equipped with magnificent equipment that transcended countless eras. On top of that, the elves had given him the password to the magical interface of the Well of Eternity. That was why he was able to launch such a crazy attack and such destructive power that could never be replicated. He almost single-handedly wiped out the entire Burning Legion vanguard. Ronan, a little wizard of humble birth, had finally reached the peak of his life on the most magnificent stage 10,000 years ago. Illidan's achievement of killing the enemy's leader was like the light of a firefly against the light of the sun in front of Ronan's achievement of destroying an entire army. Originally, Illidan would have been jealous, but with the arrival of a piece of news, all the victories and jealousy became dull. His brother Malfurion Stormrage's soul had been lost, and he had fallen into a state of absent-mindedness. Big brother. Illidan rode on the Hippogriphon and rushed back to Fort Raven as fast as he could. When he rushed into the room where his brother's body was placed, he saw Tyrande with tears streaming down her face and a group of druids who were as silent as death. What happened to my big brother? Who can tell me what happened to him? Was he killed? Or will he never wake up again? Illidan shook every elf he came across like a madman, eager to get an accurate answer from any of their mouths. Tyrann's beautiful face was full of tears, and her mouth was trembling. Finally, she said, I don't know. The druids can only confirm that Malfurion's soul is not in the Emerald Dream. What else? That's all. Are you trying to tell me that my great brother, who became a hero and saved the Night Elf army, died in a place where I can't see him? Illidan's determined face kept twitching, and his pair of amber eyes, which made his compatriots curious, flashed with an incomparably conflicted light. Yes, at this point in time, Illidan had not lost his eyes yet. He was still the moon guardian that his compatriots looked up to, and the strongest among the elves. When the leader of the moon guardians, Latuzius, died, Illidan, who had killed the Doomsday Lord named Azeroth, became the new leader of the moon guardians. It was almost certain that Illidan would become the new leader of the moon guardians. In the eyes of his compatriots, Illidan was already a hero. The problem was that at this moment, Malfurion, who had always been disliked by his compatriots, had suddenly sacrificed himself in order to enter Azhara with his soul, and open up a path of survival for his compatriots. Malfurion suddenly had all the elements of a tragic hero. Perhaps, the one who survived would be the final winner. But in the process of competing with his brother for Tyrant, Illidan, who was extremely proud of himself, knew that he did not want this result. Because victory. No, we don't know. Tyrant cried, almost choking on her sobs. She was also very confused. As childhood friends and a strong person who grew up together, she had never thought about the scene of Malfurion or Illidan dying. The kind Tyrant did not even want to hurt either of them, so how could she think about such a terrible thing? Farewell, the seemingly distant word, was so close. When it really came, Tyrant was at a loss. No, Sir Malfurion is probably not dead. His soul is probably captured. As the voice spoke, the elves turned around and saw the human mage hero who had just shown off on the battlefield standing at the door. If this human called Roddick was a night elf, he would have been revered as a god just because of this battle. But now, everyone was a little conflicted when they saw him. What the 300,000-strong army couldn't do, Roddick had done alone. While everyone was stunned, only Illidan remained clear-headed. Human, what do you think happened to Malfurion? You're saying that Malfurion used the Emerald Dream as a cover to destroy Azhara's shield that blocked the branch of magic power? Then he obviously succeeded. But he should have been taken captive. No! Tyrant screamed and covered her face with her hands. Clear tears still flowed out from between her tightly closed fingers. She did not dare to imagine what would happen to Malfurion after his soul was captured by the demons. Ronan walked over and carefully examined Malfurion's body. He was still breathing evenly, as if he was just sleeping. No torture. His soul was not corrupted by the power of darkness. We should be glad that His Excellency Malfurion was simply a captive, or his soul was trapped. Regardless of whether his soul was captured or trapped, this was not a good thing for Tyrant and Illidan. Almost as soon as this conclusion came out, they began to despair and prepared themselves to lose Malfurion forever. You're tuning in to the Lime's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.